right, welcome everyone. It is almost the 4th of July. I have been trying to get this streaming for over half an hour and unable to. So I'm going to start it on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter because it is Julian Assange's birthday. So it's imperative for me to get it out. I have opened up 1,000,001 uh, ways of getting this out there through Rumble. They are looking into it. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put it on YouTube. Worst thing that can happen is that they knock it off. Truth is a force to be reckoned with, just like freedom. Freedom is a fundamental concept that encompasses the ability to exercise one's rights, make choices with undue restraint. And it is a cherished ideal that empowers individuals to live their lives according to their own beliefs and values. However, freedom is not free. It comes with a responsibility to protect and defend it. Hence why the Second Amendment is second, for a reason, to protect the first. Throughout history, people have fought and sacrificed to secure and preserve their freedoms as they recognize the absence of vigilance that can lead to its erosion. Securing and maintaining freedom requires constant vigilance and commitment to truth and transparency, particularly in government. Governments derive their power from the people they serve, and it is essential for citizens to hold their leaders accountable. Transparency in government allows for scrutiny of actions and decisions, ensuring that power is not abused and that it serves the interests of the people, that the people's interests are actually prioritized. And truth is the foundation on which trust and legitimacy are built. And without it, the very fabric of freedom unravels. Now, to fight for freedom, citizens must engage in active participation. They can't just go to work, come home, raise a family without participating. And it has become a very daunting task only because it has become so intricate and money-centric, corporate-centric. We must, as citizens of a nation, be active in participating, being informed, and challenging misinformation or challenging corporate or foreign interests that influence the decisions and policies made within your nation. This involves us staying informed about current events, seeking diverse perspectives, reading legislation, and at least knowing what your city council member looks like. Some of you don't even know what the name of your mayor is. The bottom line is it's critically evaluating information. We should all be participating in the process of electing people, right? We should be voting. We should be advocating for our rights. We should be holding elected officials accountable. And obviously, that is also a problem that we've been having. But by demanding transparency, truth, and accountability, individuals contribute to safeguarding and strengthening of freedom for themselves and future generations. Julian Assange, today is his birthday. He's 52. Freedom is precious and an invaluable aspect of the human existence that requires continual effort and sacrifice to protect. It is not a passive state, but an active pursuit that necessitates vigilance, truth, and transparency. And Julian Assange has done just that. Proper, thorough, investigative journalism that has brought to life and light many things that you may have thought were stranger than fiction. And the evils that you believe are hiding under the bed really do exist around us. By recognizing the importance of the principles of freedom and actively engaging, you should understand just how incredible Julian Assange is. And even until today, he is in prison. And I believe today, being his birthday and on the eve of the 4th of July, it is something that we should be talking about. So please enjoy this DocuFilm. And hopefully Rumble will be up and running soon. I hope you guys enjoy this. And please pay attention. There's a lot to unpack in this video. And let's cross our fingers that YouTube doesn't knock it off. I'm streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter right now. And I'm waiting for Rumble to kick in. So please enjoy. I'll be watching with you. God bless.
Julian Assange actually speaks for all of us. He is our voice of humanity. So do everything you can to support Julian Assange. The media around the world seem a bit nervous about getting too involved in the campaign about Julian Assange. I say this to all of our friends in the media. He has told the truth about things. That is what investigative, real journalism is about. It's designed and should be to make life uncomfortable for people in office and people in power. I know that. That's right. That's what democracy is about, challenging people. Julian challenged, so they put him in prison. Release Julian Assange!
Hello, I am from the British government with a fabulous announcement. No, I'm sorry, we still haven't sorted out this bleeding shit show, but we have finally managed to arrest our most wanted criminal. No, the other one, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange. Once we're done, we'll extradite his skippy ass off to Virginia to face a grand jury. Cause we're America's bitch. Yeah, baby. We'd like to thank all who aided us in this operation, especially the Ecuadorian government.
Hola, I'm from the Ecuadorian government, and I'm here to confirm that our new president is America's bitch too. That is why he agreed to cancel Harry hackers political asylum and let pigs enter our embassy to arrest him. ¿Será que nos pueden dar nuestro crédito el FMI ahora, por favor?
Hello, I'm from the Australian government. Since Mr. Assange is our citizen, we feel compelled to state in the strongest possible terms that we're America's bitch too. That's why both of these bunk stains will leave him up shit creek without a paddle. After all, we're the same dickholes who are prosecuting whistleblowers and banning encryption to make it harder for journalists to expose our shit fuckery. Hello, I'm from the US government. We're grateful to all our bitches for handing over David Letterman, Julian Assange, who is wanted on charges of making us look like war criminals. Which of course we are. We have indicted the accused for the crime of helping his source to anonymously access documents in the public interest, otherwise known as good journalism. Journalists, of course, are not supposed to be good. They're meant to be piss weak on questioning stenographers who publish what we tolerate. By extraditing a foreign journalist, we hope to send a clear warning to all journalists not to mess with our shit. We ask all of you to cooperate with us in setting this dangerous precedent by focusing on how the accused is a bit of an asshole instead of our attempt to destroy your press freedom. American Empire. Authorized by the United Bitches of America.
In democracies, wars are a result of lies. And why one might think that should lead us to a state of despair, it should lead us also to an optimistic understanding, because if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth.
And torture my night. If my life were important, I would ask, will I live or die? But the answers like far from this world. Close every door to me. Keep those I love from me. Children of Israel are never alone. For I know I shall find my own peace of mind. For I have been promised a land of mine. I'm only one person. Destroy me completely, then throw me away. If my life were important, I will ask, will I live or die? But I know the answers lie far from this world. Close every door to me. Keep those I love from me. Children of Israel are never alone. For I know we shall find our own peace of mind. For we have been promised a land of
It must be nearly 11 years since Julian was in the company of a tree or a plant or a caterpillar or a butterfly. And so he asked me, did we have a walk in the forest? Yeah, it was pleasant enough. It's a sunny day out here. I think that if you applied, your understanding to what it would be like to live in a room for 7.5 years, you just know every nook and cranny. And so, yeah, the challenge is to make him laugh, when he rings up, which I do,
Jailed journalist and Wikileaks founder Julian Assange urged Britain's new monarch to visit His Majesty's prison at Belmarsh to commemorate the momentous occasion of his coronation. Assange started his letter by inviting the British monarch to visit his very own kingdom within a kingdom, no other than the high-security prison for men in southeast London, where he is currently detained for years. The embattled Wikileaks founder wrote that one can truly know the measure of a society by how it treats its prisoners. The 51-year-old said he is being held at the pleasure of His Majesty on behalf of an embarrassed foreign sovereign and takes pride in residing within the walls of a world-class institution. Taking a swipe at his current situation inside the notorious jail, the high-profile whistleblower told the king that visiting Belmarsh prison means he'll have the opportunity to feast upon the culinary delights prepared on a generous budget of £2 per day, such as blended tuna heads and recycled foods made from chicken, which prisoners have to eat alone inside the four walls of their prison cells. Assange ended his letter requesting for the British monarch once more to visit one of the most notorious prisons in the UK, which he said is an honour befitting a king. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese expressed his frustration over the lack of diplomatic solution on Assange's release and assured they are working through diplomatic channels. Albanese, however, refused to confirm if he will raise the matter with US President Joe Biden during the Quad Leaders Summit on May 24th. The Australian has been jailed in one of the toughest prisons in the United Kingdom for more than 4 years and is battling potential extradition to the United States, where he faces up to 175 years in prison if found guilty by the US
All
court.
our decisions, individual decisions, our political decisions, are based upon what we know. Humanity is nothing but what we know and what we have. And what we have can be replaced and degrades quickly. And what we know is everything, and it is our limit of what we can be. So before we embark on any particular political stratagem, we first have to know where we are. Because if we don't know where we are, it is impossible for us to know where we're going. Likewise, it is impossible to correct abuses unless we know that they're going on.
A lawyer for Wikileaks founder Julian Assange says he was offered a US pardon on behalf of President Donald Trump. A London court heard Wednesday. That pardon hangs off the condition Assange must deny Russian hacking, specifically that Moscow helped leak emails from the Democratic Party in 2016.
The United States must renounce its witch hunt against WikiLeaks. The United States must pledge before the world that it will not pursue journalists for shining a light on the secret crimes of the powerful.
Your secrets keep me peaceful. Your lies keep me safe. You are satisfied with my ignorance, and you are in control. But we are aware. We remember. Collateral murder. 200,000 innocent dead civilians in Iraq. Creeping mass surveillance. The censoring of our brothers and sisters. The free press being destroyed. The corruption of the powerful. The apathy of the neutered masses. The silencing of the vocal minority. Today, July 3rd is the 49th birthday of our brother, journalist Julian Assange, who once said, "Knowledge has always flowed upwards to bishops and kings, not down to serfs and slaves." Today is the day we remind you of the situation we are all in. It is not just Julian Assange that is imprisoned, it is our entire press freedom that is under attack. And it is also a day to reflect on the great achievements of WikiLeaks, including, but not limited to, the publication of the Afghan and Iraq war logs, which exposed U.S. war crimes during the Iraq War, and Vault 7, which exposed CIA spying techniques used against citizens. This is information that would have never been made public without the work of Julian Assange.
WikiLeaks has revealed millions of secrets that governments and corporations want to hide from you. The list of revelations is long.
WikiLeaks revelations over the past 13 years have changed our perception of the world around us, and it has changed how we consume information. WikiLeaks provided, and still provides, a platform for every individual to speak up against the powerful. It offers a way to anonymously inform the public about what takes place in secret. As of July 3, 2020, Assange has been in detention for 2,937 days and imprisoned in Belmarsh for 450 days. Historically, Anonymous has been a voice for the voiceless, and we must hold up to that promise. With this call to action, we ask that the entire Anonymous collective stand in solidarity with Julian Assange, not just today, but every day until he is free again. For as long as he cannot speak for himself, we must be his voice. At the same time, we must help those who continue to expose the crimes of the corrupt and the elite. Do not wait for anyone to come save you. We are on the front lines and your help is needed right now. Join us. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
We are Anonymous.
I'll wait and see what happens with the charges and how it proceeds. But he skipped bail in the UK. Sweden had those charges, which have been dropped in the last several years. But the bottom line is he has to answer for what he has done, at least as it's been charged. I do think it's a little ironic that he may be the only foreigner that this administration would welcome to the United States.
Former United States officials claim the US made plans to abduct and kill Julian Assange. A Yahoo News investigation found the CIA created a plan in 2017 to kidnap the WikiLeaks founder, an Australian citizen, while he was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. According to several unnamed former US officials, the Trump administration also requested the agency explore how it could assassinate Assange. The officials say the former CIA Director Mike Pompeo was seeking revenge on Assange after he published details about US activities overseas and unlawful mass surveillance. Assange's lawyers told Yahoo News the reported actions are shocking and that Assange has been targeted simply for publishing truthful information. Assange is being held in a London prison as UK courts decide on a US request to extradite him.
The Embassy of Ecuador in London. For almost 7 years, US state enemy number one resided here. Julian Assange. From his exile, he continued to work for Wikileaks. Police and secret services had to stay outside. Only selected visitors, such as politicians, journalists, and lawyers, were allowed inside the embassy. They were not controlled by the police, but by a security company which worked on behalf of the Ecuadorian government. Its name? UC Global.
The only goal should be protect the embassy with the guest, the political asylee.
However, according to research by the German investigative TV show Panorama, the security company apparently had a second, secret client. It was for this client that Assange and his guests were systematically spied upon. The founder of UC Global, David Morales, is said to have sent requests to his employees. These would come from American friends. A former employee said about the boss, when I asked him who his American friends are, he replied, US intelligence. Employees are said to have uploaded audit logs and videos to a server that apparently was accessible to American users. Journalists visiting Julian Assange, for example, Glenn Greenwald. Activists, colleagues, and lawyers. Meetings with his famous supporter, Vivienne Westwood. In the monitoring material which German public broadcaster NDR and WDR could evaluate are 4 videos of the actress and activist Pamela Anderson. While she spoke to Assange, the security staff seemingly spied on her phone and wrote down her password, here. Assange's guests were apparently being recorded systematically. Serial numbers of mobile phones, visit logs, endorsements, and observations. The monitoring material also includes documentation of a reporter from our team, including his American passport. John Götz has visited Julian Assange more than a dozen times for the German public broadcaster NDR and the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. Journalists like us went there, of course, to make editorial arrangements, to talk about the safety of sources, to talk about the source of documents. There were sometimes documents that were very secret, and so, of course, you had to be careful with those. Allegedly, at the request of the Americans, UC Global was asked to record the tone of discussions from 2017. Internal emails say, the indoor cameras should have a built-in microphone that is invisible to the naked eye. In December 2017, the company apparently installed new cameras with microphones, and also an additional bug in the fire extinguisher.
It's like any organization's decision-making stage based upon help.
Visiting controls of Assange's lawyer. Aitor Martinez defends him against the US. For important talks, Assange often leads his lawyer's team into the ladies' room, for fear of surveillance.
Julian
Assange was always worried about being bugged, but we never thought that this surveillance would get that far, as it now had been revealed. According to the testimony, a bug was also hidden in the ladies' room, in a cable behind this package. The fact that they recorded conversations between Assange and his legal team violates attorney-client privilege, which is a fundamental right in every democratic country. In Spain, where the headquarters of UC Global are located, the National Court has launched investigations against the security company and its boss. The lawyer of UC Global agreed to an interview to discuss the allegations of illegal wiretapping. The company denies this completely, because it is obviously wrong. It is not of interest to the company, and private conversations were never recorded. And also, it is technically impossible. But I've seen videos with sound recordings. They exist. Why are you denying it? Because until today, I have never heard them. And what was the relationship between David Morales and the United States? I already said that UC Global has worked with the US intelligence service multiple times, but not in this specific case. American authorities did not comment on the allegation of having ordered the wiretapping at the Embassy of Ecuador. The German public broadcaster NDR has filed a lawsuit on Thursday against UC Global for violating privacy and personal rights regulations.
The wife of jailed whistleblower Julian Assange has called on the Prime Minister to help free him. Stella Assange has told a 1,000-strong rally in Hyde Park her husband is in a UK jail because he exposed the crimes of others.
The only people whose interest remains Julian's imprisonment are the ones who are guilty and implicated in those crimes.
Her first visit to Australia was meant to coincide with the arrival of the US President.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And Scott's right, this is my first time to your land, and it won't be my last, obviously, because I'm going to come back here home with Julian. And our kids, who are Australian citizens, will come home too. It's been a bit bittersweet because I always imagined my first visit to Australia to be with Julian and the kids. But I'm just here for a few days. Obviously, the context for this trip was going to be President Biden and the Quad meeting, but they bailed. But I wanted to come here and be able to speak to all of you, because I want to tell you that you guys are at the forefront of a global movement for justice, a global movement that converges on one man, but the meaning of which goes far beyond Julian's freedom. It's not just Julian who has lost his freedom, but all of us. Because in order to keep Julian in prison, they have had to corrupt their own rules and their own principles. But we've reached a point now, I really feel it. We've reached a turning point, because they know that we know that they are wrong, and that they are cruel, and that they are torturing Julian because he did the right thing, because he is in prison because he exposed the crimes of others. And that no decent human being will ever tolerate that. The only people whose interest remains Julian's imprisonment are the ones who are guilty and implicated in those crimes. Now, I have to tell the children try to explain to them what's going on. And I both want to explain to them that this is not a normal situation, but also give them hope. And they have hope because they see the millions of people who support Julian. They see it all the time. But I also have to try to break down what's actually happening here. And I tell them that Julian showed the world that bad people were doing bad things. And those bad people then got so angry that they put him in a prison, and they're holding the keys to his prison cell. But that millions of people are fighting for those keys back. And all of you, each of you, are part of that fight. And there are millions around the world. I've been traveling to Italy, to Germany, in Mexico. John and Gabriel have just been in Mexico, and they were traveling throughout Latin America. Julian's case is a case of global importance. But you guys are at the center of it, because Julian is an Australian. He's a country boy. And he's from this country. And that means that the key to securing Julian's release lies with you. And you guys have been incredible over the years. I mean, I was just in Canberra, and I had a meeting in a packed out room of parliamentarians. There was standing room only. And they were from every party. It's really just the entire political spectrum who is now saying enough is enough. I agree with what has been said here, but let's not lose sight of what an achievement this has been, because a few years ago there was radio silence, and apart from Scott and a few others, people were silent about what was happening, what was being done to Julian. And there has been a sea change, and I'll tell you why. Because of you. Because you know how politicians are. They have opinions about all sorts of things. Sometimes they're the right opinions, but they won't express them unless they think it will further their political career. But you guys have made a very clear signal about what will further their political career. And you need to keep that going. You guys need to shout louder, fight harder, put the pressure on each of your representatives. Make Julian's situation visible everywhere, every day. On your cars, on your shirts, every day you tell all your friends, you talk about it with your family members, you meet with your MPs, and you make sure that Julian stays top priority until he steps out of that prison. Until he comes home to us, to all of us. I think we're near. We can achieve this together. I fight for Julian every day, but I'm not alone. I feel like I am buoyed by all of you and the enormous support that has built over the years of decent people standing for decency, for humanity, and for justice. Not in some abstract way, but in this very concrete way. And don't lose sight of the incredible community that has been formed around this case. All good people I meet, from all walks of life. People I thought I would never meet, not because for anything, but just we wouldn't cross paths. People for which sometimes I would probably have an argument on one or two things, but who have a basic sense of decency and humanity and justice, and who won't tolerate this. Julian knows I'm here today, obviously. I spoke to him this morning. He is really encouraged. It really keeps him going, you know, because every day that passes, if the other side had been successful, he would become more and more invisible, and what's happened is the opposite. And that's because of you. I want you guys to know that Julian appreciates each and every one of you. And that he knows that without you, he would never be able to be free, but now we have hope. We have real hope that Julian will be able to step out into the sun once more. I long for the day where we can come to your beautiful city and walk around these spectacular views. The harbor. My breath has been taken away. It's just so spectacular. I saw a rainbow lorikeet up close yesterday, and I saw about 30 kangaroos on the roadside. It was amazing. Julian has told me so many stories. He grew up in Queensland, and he's lived in Victoria and New South Wales, and he has so many stories. And people just imagine him behind a computer screen, but he's really a country boy, and he wants to show the kids where he grew up. He wants to take us for walks. And I really long for the day when he'll be able to do that.
Free, free Julian Assange! Free, free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
Thank you. Yes, it's important. No extradition, but not just that. Freedom. Let this man be. Let him live. Enough is enough. Let him come home to our children. Let him have just a dinner at home, you know. Let him sit on the couch. Let him take a nap. Let him feel the air on his skin. It's been denied to him for so long. I really... Let's make it happen, you guys. Thank you.
Shame, Australia, shame! Shame, Australia, shame!
I think we ought to start that thing where we have people's national treasures. Certainly David McBride, Julian Assange. There's a dear friend of mine here
in her wheelchair has come down from Brisbane. Jenny, I'll say hello to Jenny. Brown University last week published a paper, 4.5 million deaths in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq. Previously, they published a paper, 38 million refugees. What is a refugee? It's a person whose community has been destroyed, wrecked, looking for succour. We welcome many here to Australia. Many of the people who are our supporters that I meet today are once refugees from Chile or from Greece or Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Iran. To those people who organise the shattering of nation after nation, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Sudan, Libya, Syria, now Ukraine. Do those people think that somehow the flux of life, the urge to justice which is in every human heart, do they somehow imagine in their dreams that this will lead to world domination, that they can be hegemon standing in a river of blood? Do they imagine that we, with our undying yearning to see justice done, do they imagine somehow that this will succeed? It's impossible. Julian brought to us the means whereby we can involve ourselves in the formulation of policy through the accumulation of knowledge within ourselves, our families, our friends, our communities and our nations. A great gift that they want, for some reason or other. They do not understand, one, the yearning for justice in our hearts, and the other essence of being, that all genius arises from the people. It doesn't come down like rain from the sky. It arises out of the hearts and culture of us. And if I could nominate some great Australians for you, have you heard of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Herbert Everett, the author, 1948, third President of the United Nations. Have you heard of the Conventions of Asylum, taken to the United Nations General Assembly, accepted with only 16 abstentions out of 184 nations, taken and put into law by guess who? Australia under Gough Whitlam, us.
We can do it! We can do it!
We have a fine tradition which we place on the shoulders of the current government and remind them that they represent us, and without the genius of the populace, they can do nothing but fail. They can do nothing but reap obloquy and indifference and apathy, which means, of course, that institution of policy will fail because we don't support those policies. Really important things. Thanks for coming. We'll all bring Julian home together. And thank you for your patience. I just want to say, free Assange. Free Assange. Thank you.
Free Julian Assange!
Supporters of Wikileaks founder Julian Assange held an international day of action Saturday, October 8th to demand the United States halt its efforts to have him extradited to face criminal charges for his role in leaking a trove of highly classified U.S. intelligence documents by Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning. In London, hundreds of protesters gathered in a line which stretched from the British Parliament to the other side of the River Thames. Stella Morris, who is married to the Australian-born activist and publisher, said the British government should speak to authorities in the United States to end the extradition bid, which was launched in 2019.
The British government should be speaking to its counterparts in the United States to bring this matter to an end immediately. It's already gone on for 3.5 years. It is a stain on the United Kingdom. It is a stain on the Biden administration.
In Washington, D.C., dozens marched on the U.S. Department of Justice, calling on Attorney General Merrick Garland to drop charges against Assange, which include 1 charge of hacking and 17 counts of violating the World War I-era Espionage Act.
Julian is not a U.S. citizen. Wikileaks is not a U.S.-based publication. It is not legally, I think, justifiable to charge him under the U.S. Espionage Act. He's an innocent man. He's never committed a crime. The only crime he committed is telling the truth.
Chris Hedges is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and former New York Times Middle East bureau chief. He's currently the host of the Chris Hedges Report on The Real News. He says he fears the Assange prosecution could criminalize the publishing of classified documents, a vital tool for holding governments accountable.
I mean, part of the reason that I'm so involved in this is because, having worked for the New York Times, having published classified material, if Julian is sentenced, it sets a legal precedent which allows anyone who possesses classified material or publishes them to be criminalized. It's really the end of any investigation into the inner workings of power.
Assange has been jailed in London's high-security Belmarsh prison since 2019, enduring conditions that experts have condemned as torture.
The conditions of his incarceration are so brutal. I mean, he's isolated, he has suffered a minor stroke, he's lost a lot of weight, we know from the trials in London that psychologically he's had hallucinations, was found banging his head against the wall.
Assange's supporters say the U.S. is targeting him for exposing U.S. wrongdoing in Afghanistan and Iraq, including releasing the collateral murder video, which shows a U.S. Apache helicopter gunning down civilians and Reuters journalists in Iraq. Among the dozen journalists, veterans, and activists speaking out in support of Assange was Berthany Dupont, the publisher of Haiti Liberté, which has published troves of U.S. diplomatic cables obtained by Wikileaks that reveal ongoing U.S. meddling in Haiti.
We have published articles about the U.S. try to sabotage Venezuela's project to provide cheap gas and loan account to Haiti known as Petrocaribe Fund. How it fought efforts to raise Haiti minimum wage from $1.75 per day to $5 per day. How it unilaterally deployed U.S. troops into Haiti after January 2000 earthquake. How it integrated coup-making soldiers into Haiti's police force. How it approved of deadly assault on Haitian shanty towns. And how it fought tooth and nail for 7 years to stop President Aristide return to Haiti after he was exiled in 2004.
Assange's legal team has lodged an appeal at Britain's High Court against London's decision to extradite him. Hedges says it will be essential for Assange's supporters to keep up public pressure to secure his release.
Well, I think that getting out in the street is key. And surrounding the parliament, there were, I think, about a dozen actions in Australia all over the world. And I think we have to take the time and the energy to get out and make our voices heard to defend Julian. That is really key. And then the other thing is informing ourselves about the long persecution of Julian, because it's not going to get out in the commercial press.
Bradley Manning, of course, is being court-martialed right now. He's already admitted to doing some of the lower-level offenses, saying, yes, I did leak the information to WikiLeaks. He's going to explain why in testimony. In fact, he did 2 weeks ago. But it is an incredibly secretive process, and the court will not allow any video of it or audio of Manning's statements. God forbid that we should actually get his side of the story. Of course, they want to cover that up, too, which is a little ironic, to say the least. They won't even let anybody take a picture of Bradley Manning. This is, of course, the propaganda war that the U.S. government is running against Bradley Manning and anyone who would actually expose any of their information. Unless, of course, it's a leak that they're in favor of, which they give to people like Bob Woodward all the time. But now the Freedom of the Press Foundation, which is a relatively recent group that has come out, said hey, you know what? We've actually got his whole testimony from 2 weeks ago. It's over an hour long. They've got the audio tapes of it, and they have released it, which is a great service to the American people because we get to find out Manning's side of the story from his own words. So now, first, one of the things that the government always says about Bradley Manning is, my God, this guy, it was very dangerous, gave the information to our enemies. In fact, he's charged with aiding the enemy, which is the most serious charge you could possibly have and could serve a life sentence for that. So was that his intent? Absolutely not. Listen to what Manning says.
After taking that counterterrorism, or CT, and counterinsurgency coin operations, we became obsessed with capturing deadly human targets on lists and on being suspicious of and avoiding cooperation with our host nation partners, and ignoring the second and third order effects of accomplishing short-term goals and missions. I believe that if the general public, especially the American public, had access to the information contained within the Sydney I and Sydney A tables, this could spark a domestic debate on the role of the military and our foreign policy in general, as well as it related to Iraq and Afghanistan. I also believe the detailed analysis of the data over a long period of time by different sectors of society might cause society to reevaluate the need or even the desire to engage in counterterrorism and counterinsurgency operations that ignore the complex dynamics of the people living in the affected environment every day.
So his real intent was to have the American people find out what their government was doing so they could have a debate about it, so they could be informed enough to have a realistic conversation about what we're doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, that would be the textbook definition of a whistleblower. Now you say, hey, look, that's him testifying in his own trial. But remember, without needing to, he did what is called a naked plea. Without getting a plea deal from the prosecutors, admitted exactly what he had done, knowing that he could serve up to 20 years for the offenses he already admitted to. So he has a good track record certainly on being extraordinarily honest, even within his own court-martial. Plus, this is really important, he said the same exact things to the guys that turned him in when he had no idea that would have gone public. Those informants, as they were talking to Bradley Manning before he was arrested, and he had any idea he was going to be arrested, Bradley Manning told the informants, hey, listen, man, I thought there was an important debate that the country needed to have, and I had this information, and it would be wrong not to share it with the country. And of course, he's right about that. I mean, look at the things that we found out. There was 15,000 extra Iraqi civilian deaths that our government was covering up. Of course, the famous Apache murder video where the Apache helicopter comes in and shoots first responders, including a van that pulled up that had children in it where they were trying to rescue the wounded. And of course, a couple of Reuters reporters were killed in that. He also showed that the U.S. policy expressly barred U.S. troops from investigating human rights abuses by Iraqi forces. And of course, even more civilian deaths in Afghanistan as well. This is all information we needed to know that the government wasn't sharing with us. Now you can say he could serve some time because he still broke the law. But he's already served a great number of years, and some of them he was actually tortured in. In fact, his court-martial judge said, yes, you were mistreated, and we will take some time off because of your mistreatment that you already suffered in jail. Enough is enough. Now, you know what I think. I think we need to free Bradley Manning. But let's listen to Manning more to get a sense of what he was trying to do, because this next part is amazing. He talks about how the Iraqi government was using basically our intelligence guys to find people who were opposed to the government. Even though they were not terrorists, they were not bad guys, they just wanted to eliminate their political opposition, and they were using us to do it. Watch.
On 27 February 2010, a report was received from a subordinate battalion. The report described an event in which the federal police obtained, or FP, detained 15 individuals for printing anti-Iraqi literature. Over the course of my research, I found that none of the individuals had previous ties with anti-Iraqi actions or suspected terrorist or militia groups. A few hours later, I received several photos from the scene from the subordinate battalion. I printed a blown-up copy of the high-resolution photo and laminated it for ease of use and transfer. I then walked to the top and delivered the laminated copy to our Category 2 interpreter. He said the general nature of the document was benign. The documentation, as I assessed as well, was merely a scholarly critique of the then current Iraqi Prime Minister, Julian Assange.
To give you a sense of what he's talking about, the specifics, so they translate the material, this is the stuff that's supposed to be anti-Iraqi insurgents, and they realize it's just guys who are arguing against Maliki, the current prime minister, and in fact, it's a highly intellectual argument against him. It lists his corruption, and it lists the financial impact of his corruption on the Iraqi people. Exactly what you should have in a democracy. So then, Bradley Manning, having done his job, doing intelligence on that, brings it to his superiors, and listen to what happens next.
It detailed corruption within the cabinet of al-Maliki's government and the financial impact of this corruption on the Iraqi people. After discovering this discrepancy between the federal police's report and the interpreter's transcript, I forwarded this discovery to the top OIC and valid NCOIC. The top OIC, overhearing battle captain, informed me that they didn't want or that they didn't need or want to know this information anymore. They told me to, quote, drop it, unquote, and to just assist them and the federal police in finding out where more of these print shops creating, quote, anti-Iraqi literature, unquote, might be. I couldn't believe what I heard, and I returned to the T-skip and complained to the other analysts in my section NCOIC about what happened. Some were sympathetic, but no one wanted to do anything about it.
What would you do? Did you understand what he's saying there? They find out that these are perfectly legitimate political opponents of Maliki, goes to the superiors and they say, just drop it. Now, do you understand what happens to these guys when, and drop it doesn't mean we're dropping the case. Drop your whole, nonsense about what it actually says. We don't give a damn what it actually says. We're going to go round those guys up. When they round them up, they hand them over to the Iraqi police, where they most likely will get tortured and might never be released. They might even be killed. So what would you do? Would you just say, oh, okay, great, here, well, terrific, here's the names of the anti-Iraqi people, go ahead and torture or possibly even execute them? Now, if you're a person of conscience, you might also think about, hey, maybe I should leak this so that I could prevent that from happening. In fact, that's exactly what Bradley Manning thought. Watch.
I knew that if I continued to assist Baghdad federal police in identifying the political opponents of Prime Minister al-Maliki, those people would be arrested and in the custody of the special unit of Baghdad federal police, very likely tortured and not seen again for a very long time, if ever. I decided to take information and dispose it to the WLO in the hope that before the upcoming 7th March 2010 election, they could generate some immediate press on the issue and prevent this unit of the federal police from continuing to crack down on political opponents of al-Maliki.
Now, the one thing Bradley Manning was consistently wrong on is he thought if I release this information, it might have an impact. Of course, our politician and our government doesn't care about what reality is at all. They're the same guys who told him to drop it. So even if after we found out all these things, what happened? They continued to send political opponents of Maliki to get tortured and to get imprisoned, etc. We continued the war in Iraq. We certainly continued the war in Afghanistan for years and years. We're still in the middle of that war in Afghanistan. We didn't change any of our policies, and we continue to use drone strikes now, which is, different than the Apache helicopter, but an expansion of the overall idea of hitting first responders. We do double taps with those drone strikes. So unfortunately, Bradley Manning had the right intent, but it didn't work because nobody gave a damn when he gave that information. Now we give a damn, and a lot of you out there care about it and understand that's why Bradley Manning's a whistleblower and in a lot of ways a hero. But of course the government doesn't see it that way, and they're hoping to put him in prison for decades and maybe his entire life. Now, one last thing about this. Now, when it comes to the diplomatic cables, one of the ideas the government always puts out there is, oh, yeah, just carelessly put out all those cables out there. Could have done us tremendous damage. Could have had the names of people that got killed. It turns out he also said in his testimony, no, I actually double-checked. I had a lot more information. I didn't release it just in case that it was top secret or might actually do somebody harm. I only released the things that I thought that the American people could learn from. And he said we got into the First World War, World War I, because of secret pacts, etc. And I wanted to help try to avoid that. And by the way, he did have a huge impact, at least in other countries. Some of those cables that were released were part of the reason we had the revolution in Tunisia and in Egypt. Not the whole reason, but a part of the reason. So that transparency at least helped to shine a light on things that made a huge difference in the world. And for that, what do you get? A possible life sentence in America. How dare you try to educate people? How dare you try to inform the American voters? Meanwhile, of course, as I've said over and over, Bob Woodward sources who released far more classified information, top secret information, that Bradley Manning never released that level. They're free to go because they released information from government officials on leaks that helped their political careers. Now, you still think Bradley Manning should be in jail? Hell no. If he's in jail, every one of those Bob Woodward sources should be in jail, and none of them are.
35 years in prison for Bradley Manning. That's the sentence a military judge imposed on the Army private accused of giving military secrets to the website Wikileaks.
Bradley, we are with you! You are a hero!
A handful of Manning supporters who showed up at Fort Meade on Wednesday voiced their displeasure with the sentence. The judge convicted the 25-year-old soldier last month of 20 offenses, including 6 violations of the Espionage Act, but she acquitted him of the most serious charge of aiding the enemy. Manning could have been sentenced to 90 years behind bars. Prosecutors had asked for at least 60. But Manning's lawyer had fought for much less time, saying that in 25 years, some of the documents the former intelligence analyst had leaked would have been declassified. Wednesday's sentence capped a 12-week trial. Tom Ritchie, Associated Press.
The United Nations Special Envoy on Torture has complained he's been prevented from gaining unmonitored access to Bradley Manning. He's the young US soldier accused of leaking classified documents to WikiLeaks. Juan Mendez said he was disappointed and frustrated after he was told he could only visit if officials were present. Private Manning is being held in solitary confinement at a US Marine base in Virginia, where his lawyers claim he's been maltreated. Our Washington correspondent Sarah Smith has this.
Free Bradley Manning! Free Bradley!
Many Americans are disgusted by the way Private Bradley Manning is being treated.
Free Bradley Manning!
They protest quite graphically about the way he's been forced to remove all his clothes at night and then stand naked outside his cell for morning inspection. The UN think Manning's treatment might constitute torture, but the American government will not allow the UN's torture investigator to speak to Manning alone.
I am deeply disappointed and frustrated by the prevarication of the U.S. government with regards to my attempts to visit Mr. Manning. I understand that Private Manning does not wish to waive his right to an unmonitored conversation with me.
Mendez says he cannot ascertain if Manning is being ill-treated with prison officials listening in. Manning is kept alone in his cell for 23 hours of every day, but the Pentagon insists this is not solitary confinement.
He's not in a hole. He's not away from others. He's allowed to have conversations with others on that corridor. The only difference really in how he's being treated than others is outside of his cell. He does not take his meals in the chow hall, but nor do any other maximum security detainees. He doesn't exercise out in the prison yard, but nor do the others.
President Obama seems happy to accept the Pentagon's assurances at face value.
I have actually asked the Pentagon whether or not the procedures that have been taken in terms of his confinement are appropriate and are meeting our basic standards. They assure me that they are.
That's not good enough, say people who believe Manning's treatment is both cruel and unusual.
One telephone call from President Obama to the Department of Defense and this torture would be ended. I'd hope that President Obama does the right thing, allows this official visit, and forces the Department of Defense to publicly defend why they're treating Manning this way.
The information Bradley Manning is accused of leaking hugely embarrassed the United States, but their treatment of him is now doing exactly the same thing. This row is making President Obama look deeply hypocritical. Remember, this is the man who promised to ban torture and to end the harsh treatment of detainees, yet this is all happening very much on his watch. Already one of his top officials has had to resign because he called the treatment of Manning stupid and counterproductive. And now many of the country's top legal scholars, including Obama's old professor from Harvard University, have all signed a letter saying they think the treatment is also immoral and illegal.
The battle lines are drawn. Bradley Manning wants hormone therapy, and his friends say he needs it.
This is a medical necessity.
Lauren McNamara chatted online with Manning and testified in his defense. She also transitioned from male to female.
Deny someone treatment for this just because they're in prison is similar to denying them treatment for depression.
But the Army has never provided hormone replacement therapy to any soldier. Prison officials tell us Manning will wear the standard prison uniform at the all-male Fort Leavenworth, and he will not receive the hormones he says he needs to transition to a woman.
He would have a better shot theoretically in a federal prison or even in a state prison.
Attorney Neil Minahan fought and won the right for one of his clients to get hormones in Massachusetts. State and federal prisons don't have a blanket ban on the therapy, like the military. Consistent injections can cost thousands of dollars, and taxpayers have been paying for prisoners' therapy for years.
It can't be just him stating that he wants to get this medication. It needs to be a prescription.
But several military doctors have already diagnosed him with gender identity disorder. While he was deployed to Iraq, Manning emailed this photo to his sergeant and described his inner struggle over wanting to live as a woman.
And yet this was often pushed to the side because the unit was underpowered and they could not afford to lose any analysts.
So Manning stayed in Iraq and later became the man behind the largest leak of classified material in U.S. history. Legal experts tell us it's that crime and Manning's behavior while he's being held at Fort Leavenworth that will ultimately determine whether he's paroled. They don't believe that his gender identity issues will be a huge factor. Chris Lawrence, CNN, The Pentagon.
Are you concerned, Mr. President, that commuting Chelsea Manning's sentence will send a message that leaking classified material will not generate a tough sentence to groups like Wikileaks? How do you reconcile that in light of Wikileaks' connection to Russia's hacking in last year's election? And related to that, Julian Assange has now offered to come to the United States. Are you seeking that, and would he be charged or arrested if he came here?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Chelsea Manning has served a tough prison sentence. So the notion that the average person who was thinking about disclosing vital classified information would think that it goes unpunished, I don't think would get that impression from the sentence that Chelsea Manning has served. It has been my view that given she went to trial, that due process was carried out, that she took responsibility for her crime, that the sentence that she received was very disproportionate relative to what other leakers had received, and that she had served a significant amount of time, that it made sense to commute and not pardon her sentence. And I feel very comfortable that justice has been served and that a message has still been sent that when it comes to our national security, that wherever possible, we need folks who may have legitimate concerns about the actions of government or their superiors or the agencies in which they work, that they try to work through the established channels and avail themselves of the whistleblower protections that have been put in place. I recognize that there's some folks who think they're not enough, and I think all of us, when we're working in big institutions, may find ourselves at times at odds with policies that are set. But when it comes to national security, we're often dealing with people in the field whose lives may be put at risk, or the safety and security and the ability of our military or our intelligence teams or our embassies to function effectively. And that has to be kept in mind. So with respect to WikiLeaks, I don't see a contradiction. First of all, I haven't commented on WikiLeaks generally. The conclusions of the intelligence community with respect to the Russian hacking were not conclusive as to whether WikiLeaks was witting or not in being the conduit through which we heard about the DNC emails that were leaked. I don't pay a lot of attention to Mr. Assange's tweets, so that wasn't a consideration in this instance, and I refer you to the Justice Department for any criminal investigations, indictments, extradition issues that may come up with him. What I can say broadly is that in this new cyber age, we're going to have to make sure that we continually work to find the right balance of accountability and openness and transparency that is the hallmark of our democracy, but also recognize that there are adversaries and bad actors out there who want to use that same openness in ways that hurt us, whether that's in trying to commit financial crimes or trying to commit acts of terrorism or folks who want to interfere with our elections. And we're going to have to continually build the kind of architecture to make sure the best of our democracy is preserved, that our national security and intelligence agencies have the ability to carry out policy without advertising to our adversaries what it is that we're doing, but do so in a way that still keeps citizens up to speed on what their government's doing on their behalf. But with respect to Chelsea Manning, I looked at the particulars of this case the same way I have the other commutations and pardons that I've done, and I felt that in light of all the circumstances that commuting her sentence was entirely appropriate.
As a working journalist, am I concerned about what's happening to press freedom in Hong Kong? Absolutely. But am I going to be lectured on it by plaster saints like the US and its cronies? Absolutely not. Let me tell you why. Imagine if a Chinese journalist blows the lid on a plethora of present-day war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated by China. And imagine if this journalist breaks the news from another country, but is about to be extradited to China to be imprisoned for the rest of his life or worse. The whole world would self-combust in collective outrage. Well, there is no such Chinese journalist. There is, however, a giant of an Australian journalist in such a predicament, and the villain of the piece is the United States, not China. I'm talking about Julian Assange. And even as I speak, he continues to be victimized, vilified, and crucified in a slow execution right before our eyes. What did he do to deserve it? He told the truth. He dared to be the ultimate journalist, exposing American war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, the slaughter of civilians, the killing of journalists, the torture of prisoners at Guantanamo, and Washington's secret war on Yemen, where mass murder still continues under the auspices of the White House. Fun fact, all of these are undeniable crimes secretly documented by the US government itself. They were just not meant to be exposed by Assange. The US was so embarrassed and so hell-bent on vengeance that it orchestrated a global campaign to destroy him with the complicity of vassal states like Britain and Australia. Assange took refuge at Ecuador's embassy in London for 7 years before British police dragged him out and threw him into a maximum security prison that houses terrorists, murderers, and rapists. Nearly 3 years later, after a sham trial in a kangaroo court with the flimsy case against Assange thoroughly discredited, Britain's much-vaunted justice system has paved the way for his extradition to the US, where he faces certain death. They have already dehumanized and reduced him to a suicidal, stroke-ridden, physical and mental wreck of a man. But they're not done with him yet. Speaking of kangaroo justice, not a word, not a peep out of the Australian government over this appalling persecution of its own citizen. They're all laser-focused on worrying about journalists in Hong Kong instead. Perhaps we should be flattered by all the love and attention. By the way, we also know now that the CIA actually plotted to assassinate Assange in London, even exploring the option of murdering him in a street shootout. Go democracy! I quote American journalist Chris Hedges. Julian Assange committed the empire's greatest sin. He exposed it as a criminal enterprise. He documented its lies, callous disregard for human life, rampant corruption, and innumerable war crimes. Republican or Democrat, conservative or Labour, Trump or Biden, it does not matter. The goons who oversee the empire sing from the same satanic songbook. Empires always kill those who inflict deep and serious wounds. End quote. Is there no limit to the insufferable hypocrisy of these gangsters in glass houses, these emperors who have no clothes? They defecate all over human rights and press freedom in the name of national security whenever it suits them, calling it justice. When some other country they don't like does anything of that sort, it's repression. How convenient. Here I quote another astute political commentator from the West, George Galloway. If Julian Assange were a Chinese journalist and publisher, he'd have the Nobel Prize, be the centerpiece of Human Rights Day. If Chinese crimes rather than American crimes had been revealed by Assange, he would now be the poster boy for the Winter Olympics boycott campaign. End quote. What they're doing to this brave man who has done more for journalism than any of us is a travesty, an atrocity, an abomination. Until and unless they free Assange, the US, the UK, and Australia, and any other nation in bed with this menage a trois of morally bankrupt Western powers, pardon my French, have no right to preach human rights and press freedom to the rest of us. Flush your own feces first before you lecture us on sanitation.
Airplane tickets, hotel rooms, and global escape plans for people like Edward Snowden. It all cost money.
We're trying to help in the limited ways that we can.
Yet the numbers from Wikileaks suggest a rapidly dwindling supply of cash. Their records show they took in $43,000 in the first half of last year, but spent nearly 8 times as much. So some supporters like John Perry Barlow have set up their own websites to funnel funds to Wikileaks. He says he sent $120,000 so far.
I care about it for the same reason that I would care about the New York Times. I care about making sure that the press is free to report on what goes on inside a government that I pay for and participate in.
WikiLeaks' financial problems are no accident. Leader Julian Assange has railed against Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and others for refusing to process donations from online supporters. How much? Unknown. But WikiLeaks says in 2010, $1.7 million poured in. Political players have suggested the money companies are right to turn away, considering the allegations of illegal activity.
What WikiLeaks has done amounts to espionage.
But WikiLeaks says the banking blockade is revenge for the release of sensitive documents about the U.S. military, Guantanamo, diplomatic efforts, and surveillance programs. Their website blames senior right-wing politicians for a financial vendetta, for even making assassination calls against WikiLeaks staff.
I ask President Obama to do the right thing. The United States must renounce its witch hunt against WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks undeniably has fervent fans, many small donors willing to give the group money, and has had success clearing a path for them. Just 2 months ago, the Supreme Court in Iceland ordered a financial company there called Valitor, which has ties to Visa and MasterCard, to stop blocking donations. WikiLeaks celebrated and tweeted, "We send out a warning to the other companies involved in this blockade. You're next." But for now, against a sea of powerful opponents, WikiLeaks seems in a desperate hunt for funding with which to fight back.
Why didn't somebody investigate this international child kidnapping ring being operated by the CIA? Why are these congressmen voting on bills like the Patriot Act, which takes away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties in the best interests of, quote, protection for our country and protection from the terrorists? Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. There are people in our government, a rogue outfit, whatever, I'm not sure, who are actually behind these terrorist acts. And the reason they're behind the terrorist acts is so they can pass bills like the Patriot Act. And the reason the congressmen and the senators vote for these stupid bills, stupid by our terms and our definition, is because many of them have been set up and framed through sex and drugs.
US President Barack Obama was in Silicon Valley on Thursday night to meet a handful of the biggest names in the tech industry. Among the subjects lightly discussed at the closed meeting was the president's plan to invest in research and development to boost America's high-tech competitiveness, something he spoke about earlier this week.
I'm convinced that if we outbuild and out-innovate and out-educate, as well as out-hustle the rest of the world, the jobs and industries of our time will take root here in the United States. Our people will prosper, and our country will succeed.
The White House released a single video clip, and this photo, which shows President Obama speaking with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Also in the picture, Yahoo CEO Carol Bartz and Google CEO Eric Schmidt. Others present at the meeting included Twitter CEO Dick Costolo, Oracle CEO Larry Ellison, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings, Cisco Systems CEO John Chambers, and Apple CEO Steve Jobs. Reporters didn't catch a glimpse of Jobs. The head of Apple is currently on medical leave from the company and surrounded by intense speculation about his health. On Friday, the president will leave San Francisco and head to Oregon, where he'll visit Intel's state-of-the-art chip factory. Martin Williams, IDG News Service.
One of the criticism that is constant is that damage has occurred because of WikiLeaks. I can't find it yet. Do you have a reason?
Well, it's a rhetorical trick.
Okay.
So
you understand why I'm asking?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the case against your vision. Obviously, we're sympathetic to it. So.
Up until collateral murder, we were a cause célèbre in the United States. Actually, we're still a cause célèbre, but it's in a smaller libertarian or left-wing or libertarian right-wing community now. But and across, according to Reuters, across 24 countries, we have over three-quarter support of the general population of 24 countries. It's the worst in the United States. So we have support over 40% of the population, which is pretty good, actually, considering what's been happening. So as a result of embarrassing the US military and the diplomatic class, we have had a counterattack. And that counterattack is significant. This is a very significant power group. And it's a power group that is not just at the top of the White House, it's not just a few generals. Rather, it is all the people connected to and profiting from that system. And that's about a third of the US population. So all the way from Chelsea Clinton down to someone in the gutters of San Antonio whose brother is deployed in Iraq. There are 900,000 people in the United States with top secret security clearances at this moment. There are 2.5 million that have classified security clearances. If we go back over the past 20 years and ask how many people had security clearances, maybe it's 15 million. If we then go and look at all their spouses and business partners and children, we're looking at something like 30% of the population of the United States is 1 degree removed from that way of living and that ideological structure and that patronage system. So it's quite difficult in the United States to say something that is against that system. And the New York Times has found to its peril when it tries to speak out against it. And so in its relationships with us, when it published material, had to react very defensively in a way to someone outside. I think even traditional US journalists think this. It is sickening to see a newspaper of any strength saying literally how pleased those words the White House was with its behaviour. So if we look at the attacks on us, they always talk about the words placed people at risk. But risk relative to what? Right now, we are at risk of a meteorite passing through the roof of this house and killing us all. That is a risk, it is true. But is it a proportionate risk? Is it a risk that is significant enough that is even worth speaking about? Well, the answer is no. Similarly with the word possibility. There's a possibility a meteorite could descend on us all in this moment, but it is not a probability. So these rhetorical tricks are often used by people who are making their argument in relation to security. If there is a risk of something, there is a possibility of something. What has to be done is people need to engage in sort of intellectual defense against manipulation by rhetoric, by understanding that if someone mentions that there's a risk without saying the risk is higher than crossing the road, or the risk is twice that of being stung by a bee, then you must ignore it. Similarly with possibility versus probability.
Yeah, I can do all this in my head too. Are there examples where a positive outcome that can be directly traced to WikiLeaks in the political sphere that you would want to highlight? Something that's a specific, tangible, positive outcome.
Well, the most significant one seems to be the Arab Spring.
And you would argue WikiLeaks was a clear...
Well, Amnesty International did in its latest report, and Tunisian professors did. Because of my direct involvement, it would be unseemly for me to argue that directly. I'm not certain about directly. I am certain that we affected it and were deeply involved in it. I'm certain that we And that is really something of great moment. Something I am certain about is that we changed the outcome of the Kenyan election in 2007. There's been many ministers whose scalps were taken and people being forced to resign and so on. Those are concrete and clear actions. And one might argue that they're positive if you didn't like the guy, and you would argue that they're negative if you did like the guy, so I don't really want to mention those.
Yes, if I go back to your earlier argument, that the effect on a single individual is not the actual goal. The actual effect is to change the system in some fundamental way, because you make the argument that these systems have become fiscalized. They're static, independent of any pressure. And so an example of a truly large influence would be a revolution. Right?
Well, it's something that is... You can make many large influences without these sort of dichotomatic events. But the dichotomatic events are easy to... binary events are easy to talk about, and it's provable.
It's also a marketing problem. You have a marketing story.
Yeah. So one party or another party wins the election, and it changed, and that's a very clear sort of outcome. There's a revolution. One group was in power, then another group was in power. It's a very clear change. I suspect the other changes that we have had, such as liberalisation of the publishing environment, I suspect is actually the most significant one that we've been involved in, and something we've pushed for many years. There's no way that what we did last year we could have done 4 years ago. It would not have been possible.
How come, technologically, or in terms
technologically, it was all perfectly possible. The difference is a shift in status quo. WikiLeaks became the status quo. So. And that wasn't always so. During the first 2 years, we were battling for whether we were something that was acceptable to be on the internet or not. After 2 years, and especially after the Bank Julius Baer case, where we were involved in a big legal case in San Francisco. On the one hand, us. On the other hand, the largest private Swiss banking concern, Bank Julius Baer, that was trying to shut us down, which we conclusively won, and cost them their US IPO as a result. That sort of sent out a signal that there is a place in the world for a publisher like WikiLeaks, and then we started to cement that place as time went by, and now we have really cemented it, because we had a case where the Pentagon stood up in public and gave a 40 many times actually, but back in October gave a 40-minute press conference with their spokesperson Jeff Morrell, saying that WikiLeaks must, and me personally, must destroy everything we previously published, being derived from the Pentagon, destroy everything we were going to publish, and cease dealing with US military whistleblowers. The precise phraseology used was return everything that we had ever published, return everything we were going to publish, and cease soliciting information from US military personnel or US government personnel. Or the Pentagon would compel us to do so. And when asked by a journalist at the press conference, what mechanisms do you have to compel them? The response was, well, look, this is the Pentagon, we're not concerned about the law. That's perhaps a matter for the Department of Justice and Attorney General.
When you watched that, did you get the impression that there was just an unbelievable level of naivete or lack of understanding about the actual technology and technical aspects of this that would make that impossible?
I did, but then I later on developed a more sophisticated understanding of what was going on in that press conference.
I actually started out very unsophisticated.
So what was actually going on is this was a carefully, I mean, it seems ridiculous. Why would the Pentagon act like a victim? Why would they look so ridiculous and powerless? Why would they give a demand that they were not capable of fulfilling? It would make them look weak. It was a carefully constructed legal message designed to embroil us in the US Espionage Act. It was a notification, like you see in the newspapers. We demand that you do this. This is the type of information. It will cause grave harm to US national security. We make a press conference so we can argue that all those WikiLeaks people have seen it. Then the next thing they publish, they will demonstrate intent. So despite the fact that they have been informed that it is this, and this, they did it anyway, therefore they have an intent, because you can't accidentally commit espionage.
That's why they're concerned with the past, not just with the present. Because there has to be a pattern of practice, and as long as it's a fresh incident, there is no pattern.
Yeah. But in saying no, which we did quickly, actually before we had to sort what the legal track was. But in saying no, and then in relatively short order producing the Iraq war diaries, and it's one of the best things we've ever done.
The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is a research and development agency of the United States Department of Defense and is responsible for the development of emerging technologies for use by the military. DARPA had a program called LifeLog, and its goal was exactly that, to log one's entire life. LifeLog aimed to compile a massive electronic database of every activity and relationship a person engages in. This was to include credit card purchases, websites visited, the content of telephone calls and emails sent and received, faxes, postal mail sent and received, instant messages sent and received, books and magazines read, television viewing habits and radio selections, physical locations recorded by wearable GPS sensors, and even biomedical data captured through wearable sensors. The point of collecting all of this data on everyone was to identify preferences, plans, goals, and markers of intentionality. Another of DARPA's goals for LifeLog had a predictive function. It sought to, quote, find meaningful patterns in the timeline to infer the user's routines, habits, and relationships with other people, organizations, places, and objects, and to exploit these patterns to ease its task. Sounds absolutely terrifying, correct? Well, lucky for us, it was shut down February 4th, 2004, over criticism from civil libertarians concerning the privacy implications of such a system. Interestingly, though, on that exact same day, February 4th, 2004, a small and little-known website at the time launched called Facebook. No, I'm not joking, not in the slightest. The exact same day that they shut down LifeLog, Facebook started. Lucky for us, though, back in 2020, on Twitter, the official DARPA account came out to reassure people that LifeLog and Facebook have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Even though certain employees of LifeLog went to work at Facebook, it's nothing to worry about. Right. Once you learn all that, it makes you look back at all those news stories that you heard over the years of Facebook selling user information to other companies, and all this stuff seems pretty obvious now. We've been played, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Mike McKibben. I'm the founder of Leader Technologies in Columbus, Ohio. This presentation is going to give a little of my background, and it's also going to describe what is in effect a $1 trillion lien that we have just filed against the federal government, called the Miller Act Notice. If this is the first time you've heard our story, then you can be forgiven for being skeptical, because I certainly would be if this was my first time hearing this story. But I assure you, everything that we talk about in this presentation is true, and this is arguably one of the largest financial crimes ever.
This may come as a surprise to you, but I invented social networking. I have the patents to prove it. I have just served a Miller Act notice on the executive branch at the White House. We are demanding that the government pay us for using my invention since 2000. President Trump had nothing to do with this theft, but his predecessors Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama did. However, the Miller Act requires that we serve the notice to the current U.S. executive. That's why the notice is addressed to President Trump. The abuse of my inventions by the government now totals into the trillions of dollars in damages. The Miller Act, which is 40 U.S.C. 3131, allows unpaid suppliers to federal contracts to get paid when the prime contractor does not pay for the benefits they have received. President Trump can fix this injustice to me, my shareholders, the U.S. Constitution, and we the people. In 1993, just as Bill Clinton was bringing his Arkansas drugs, pedophilia, money laundering, and blackmail machine to Washington, globalists aligned with Clinton, also called the establishment, the deep state, and the shadow government, hatched plans to seize control of the emerging internet via rogue U.S. intelligence insiders. However, historically, this agenda to restore tyranny to elitists reaches back to 1776, when all power was placed into the hands of we the people. In 1995, I helped bail out AT&T from great industry embarrassment. I rebuilt their AT&T Access Plus 3.0 email system in 6 months, in time for the release of Windows 95. Bell Labs, who quoted 3 years to build it, became my testers. The commercial internet was just beginning. I launched one of the first 10 hosted websites by AT&T WorldNet, along with Disney and others. I knew 3 things from that experience. AT&T, Microsoft, IBM, and others were focused on legacy groupware for collaboration platforms. Groupware could not handle large-scale internet volume. We knew that if we could solve this internet scaling problem, it would be revolutionary. So in 1997, I assembled a world-class engineering team. We worked on the internet scale problem for 3 years. In December of 1999, we had the proverbial aha moment. We invented a new kind of metadata. It enabled the exchange of metadata instead of whole files. Some experts say our discovery was akin to Edison's light bulb in its impact on society. For example, in rough numbers, in legacy groupware, a 1 megabyte file shared with 100 people generates 100 megabytes of data. In our invention, a 1 megabyte file shared with 100 people may generate 10,000 bytes. That's a 10,000% efficiency. We knew our discovery was unique. Among my team were architects of major digital networks in banking, defense, procurement, intelligence, and telecommunications, so I started looking for the best patent attorney in the country immediately.
In February of 2000, we were introduced to law professor James P. Chandler. He was touted as the best. Chandler's credentials seemed to support that. He advised the White House, Congress. By April of 2000, Chandler was participating in our engineering design sessions. We thought we were being well protected by Attorney Chandler. We were wrong. Chandler and IBM ripped out my privacy controls and are pushing a Big Brother Internet of Things with deep state shadow government assistance. Their public-private deal was simple. Spies get all user data for blackmail, in the name of national security, of course, and private companies exploit that data for profit. Chandler drafted executive orders, created this mess, starting with Clinton and carrying on through Bush and Obama. My leader shareholders and their families deserve a payday. As an American entrepreneur and inventor, I played by the book. So did my investors. I hope this doesn't sound pushy or arrogant, but don't you agree that it's about time that we get our payday? I ask you, if you were an electrician hired by the prime contractor to wire a building and you did the work, but the contractor was paid and you were not paid, wouldn't you demand payment? Our case is really that simple, except in our case, the damages happen to be astronomical.
All right, so give us a brief outline for our viewers, Mike, exactly what your claims against Facebook are so they have a little bit of a backstory.
We filed for patents at the end of 2002 for technology which we received in 2006, which is basically what the market calls social networking now. We sued Facebook for patent infringement and won a verdict. Facebook is guilty on 11 of 11 counts of infringing that patent, and Facebook won on a very minor charge against us, which we're appealing in the federal circuit right now. And we're confident that once the judges actually pay attention to the misconduct that occurred at trial on that particular allegation, will prevail.
A lot of this backstory also starts in the dorm rooms of Harvard. You say that you sent a document to your son who was at school at Harvard at the same time as Mark Zuckerberg, so we want to bring that to our viewers' attention. But Mike, let me bring this to you. According to some of my sources, a federal circuit court has denied your petition to rehear a case, that one specific case you're mentioning. That happened this morning. You say that you'll take this issue all the way to the Supreme Court. How are you going to get from where you are right now to perhaps the Supreme Court and bridge the gap there?
Well, that news you've just brought to me was unfamiliar to me, which is another interesting point of timing in that this interview was getting ready to occur. We have noticed this kind of misconduct now ever since the trial, and our attorneys are ready to take this to the Supreme Court because the matters of law involved here not only affect us, but they affect every inventor who's got a patent, who's fighting against a big infringer to secure their property rights.
And there are about 80 plus cases, patent infringement cases, that are currently outstanding, have been put against Facebook, with half of those still outstanding. Mike, what do you make of a criticism out there that exists for you and everyone else out there who's suing Facebook, that you're piggybacking on the success of Facebook, that you're perhaps not creating your own success, that you're choosing to take a bite of their own success instead?
Well, I can't speak for everybody else. I can speak for us. And for us, we invented this technology starting in the late 90s. And we have investors who have stood with us and who deserve their payday. And we invented the technology that Facebook has been judged to infringe. And these issues that the Federal Circuit apparently is not paying attention to of law have everything to do with everyone's property rights, not just ours, because patents are a property right. And if they're going to take away our property right, in this case, what property is next? Yeah, the hot button issue certainly in Silicon Valley right now. Mike, very quickly, before I let you go, what's the end game here? A payout, a partnership, somewhere in between? Well, in any patent infringement case, you have settlement that goes on. And so, we're open to whatever the appropriate settlement is. But again, my investors deserve their payday. And right now, Facebook has stolen their technology. And we're going to keep fighting until we see justice.
So there's a lot that I don't think the average person quite understands about the tech industry. For example, technology is stolen very often. Google acquiring the source code for Gmail, YouTube, Google+, and Google Me, which is in the works now. And this was all acquired when Eric Schmidt obtained it from IBM through DARPA. IBM Eclipse stole it from Leader Technologies. Who's the founder of Leader Technologies? Michael McKibben. Well, today, I'm here to talk about the most costly theft in the history of technology. The loss of the social network invention is estimated to be upwards of $1 trillion. McKibben was awarded patent number 7,139,761 for social networking. The theft of McKibben's idea was so complete, Wikipedia doesn't even mention him. The guy who filed the patent for social networking doesn't even have his own Wikipedia page. But there's a reason he doesn't, and it's because I'm willing to bet most people would never have any clue He was the initial patent filer, among other reasons that Wikipedia in particular would hold dear, but I'll get to all that. The founder of Wikipedia is Ward Cunningham. You know who he worked for from October 2005 to May 2007? The Eclipse Foundation. Sound familiar? It's the foundation that handled IBM Eclipse, the company who stole the source code from Leader Technologies and gave it to Eric Schmidt for Google. However, McKibben filed the patent 4 years prior to Ward working at IBM Eclipse. I'll get to that soon, all of this, but first, the backstory leading up to this point. The Hollywood overblown hype around the movie The Social Network doesn't even begin to grace the surface of the truth. The whole Zuckerberg story is just a veil over the underpinning of social medias and their true use to the NSA. Zuckerberg actually attended Harvard at the same time as McKibben's son. While he was there, McKibben sent his son the source code for social networking via email. Zuckerberg hacked the servers at Harvard, and McKibben personally believes Zuckerberg accessed the white paper in that hack. Now, Michael McKibben was also a man very into religion and music. He spent 10 years of his earlier life traveling the world playing music as living sound. Perhaps the most notable performance they ever did was at Poland's Independence Day rally in the politically volatile 1970s, under the careful eye of the Pope as well as the secret Polish police. Living Sound then performed several times in the USSR, even though Western Christian bands were banned, but due to the fact they were spending Western money in the East, the government looked the other way. A day after one of their performances in Poland, Lech Walesa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Lech Walesa, 10 years before becoming the Polish president, jumped the fence at a Lenin shipyard in Poland and led a workers' strike. The history of McKibben's music and the impact he had on revolting against the communists is long and complex, and only vaguely connected to social networking. So instead of going on a long tangent here, I'll just put a link in the description to a detailed history, but back to McKibben and social networking. McKibben said he credits his invention of social networking on these experiences earlier in his life. Back in the early 2000s, much of the social networking system was still on the drawing board when it was stolen. Those who stole it stripped out the privacy settings and the security features so that they could now abuse the social media for surveillance, data collection, and the eventual construction of an AI based on all user input. In the early 90s, McKibben was competing with Bell Labs, better known as AT&T now, to redevelop the email system before Windows 95 came out through Microsoft. And McKibben won the contract. After this, Leader Technologies came out with their own line of systems that utilized McKibben's concept of social networking, such as Leader Phone, Leader Alerts, or Leader Alert, Leader Meeting, Digital Leaderboard, Leader to Leader, Leader Private Email, and it was all done with privacy and security being near the forefront of their mission. Their slogan, which ironically sounds like just what someone would say if they were trying to surveil you, was, "We won't read your email." Now, let's discuss Facebook specifically. During the post-Soviet era, Harvard economists were making Russian leaders very uneasy about some of their economic advisements to the Russians. One of the economists was Larry Summers, who had recently left Harvard to become the chief economist at the World Bank. Two of his assistants were Sheryl Sandberg and Yuri Milner. Sandberg is now the Facebook chief operating officer. Milner is Facebook's largest outside investor. McKibben's social networking concept was the basis for large-scale collaboration over the internet concerning huge corporations, the stock exchange, communication. This was a huge step forward because previous systems developed by IBM, Microsoft, and Novell were only able to operate within a single company. McKibben's could interact between millions of users. Leader Technologies was founded in 1997, and McKibben developed his dream team to implement his idea. The breakthrough moment with the social networking wasn't until 1999, though. And seeing as there were only 10 million internet users in total back in 1999, McKibben knew the technology was before its time. So he just went to file patents. This is where things get a little bit hairy, okay? When McKibben filed the patent, his patent attorney was James P. Chandler III. You know who some of Chandler's other clients were? IBM and the NSA. McKibben's social networking patent was taken and given to IBM and the NSA, thus assuring McKibben would never be connected to the idea. The concept he created was exactly what the NSA and IBM needed at the time. It was a means to manipulate, surveil to a certain degree, gain data, and Most importantly, as I said, build a collective AI based on the input of every person using the social media platform. Schmidt benefited from this too, of course, Eric Schmidt. The patent attorney Chandler already had his own plan to radically transform America, though. Barry Santera, Barack Obama. This was shown partially by how Chandler set up his clientele because it was orchestrated, and Chandler's main IBM contact was David Kapos. Yeah, David Kapos. Kapos was appointed to the director of the patent office by Barack Obama in 2009. Since the theft of the social network, Facebook has filed hundreds of patents which are suspected to be largely influenced by the 60 patents stolen from Leader Technologies by Chandler during his time as McKibben's patent attorney. Sometimes I remember what the Founding Fathers did when they wrote the Constitution. Some things were left vague, a lot of things were left vague. In fact, there were other things, though, that were more specific. There's a reason the Founding Fathers only included the rights to one specific property in the Constitution. That was patents and copyrights. They knew the importance of protecting someone's intellectual property so that the free market incentives can remain alive and flourish. If this was left unspecified, I could very much see the Supreme Court trying to flex their monopoly on interpreting the Constitution by saying you don't have rights to your intellectual property. Corruption's nearly inevitable in a monopoly. Luckily, the system is set to balance power well, but it's failed in the past. Now, McKibben's intellectual property and his right to protect it was not even considered by the government. They didn't care because they didn't have to. Since then, stooges are given this role as the face of a company, such as Zuckerberg for Facebook, Dorsey for Twitter, Bezos for Amazon, when Amazon's run by the same guy as Alphabet, John Doerr. In 2002, Chandler worked to obtain a copy of Leader's actual programming source code for safekeeping. 11 weeks later, IBM Eclipse's version 2.0.1 came out riddled with Leader source code. In 2003, Leader discovered a major flaw in the programming that they worked to fix. During that same time, IBM and Chandler worked to recruit a programmer at Harvard, which is where they all went to school, and looked to make him the front man for Facebook. That man was Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg's main job initially was to prevent anyone else from developing a campus-wide social network, because that was the first step of launching Facebook worldwide, to create it in the campus environment. At that time, 3 other people were working on social networking. There were the Winklevoss twins, Greenspan, and Peter Seglia. Zuckerberg made programming deals with the Winklevoss twins and Seglia, but then hindered them from completing their platforms. False promises were made with Greenspan to just stall them. On the night of October 28, 2003, Leader's engineers fixed a critical part of the code that was flawed. That's the same night Zuckerberg wrote in his online diary, "Let the hacking begin." He then proceeded to hack the house sites of Harvard and stole data and students' photos. And that's why Facebook was not created by Mark Zuckerberg. He stole it.
Today, senior administration officials will hold a call to discuss the White House's launch of the U.S. Digital Service. I assume that this is going to be read in like the movie trailer voice. Yeah.
My name is Mikey Dickerson. I'm in D.C. to be the new administrator of a new thing which has just been created called the U.S. Digital Service.
So how's day one?
We're 15 minutes into it. I'm surviving so far. This is the first time I've had a first day of a new job where go to orientation.
Welcome to the Executive Office of the President.
Except we don't really have time to finish orientation because we're going to do your press conference, which is at 12:30. So I'm like, okay, I've been in the government for all of 2 hours. We haven't sworn in yet, even.
Oh, the parking forms. Yeah, you're right. No, I haven't done that yet. So they said that it would be ready. Okay. First problem. The password you have typed is too short. Okay, we're going to deal with this later.
For me, this whole government adventure started last October when I got asked to be part of the group that worked on healthcare.gov, which of course everybody's heard of. It was going very poorly at the time. There was a sufficient number of engineers, programmers, designers. Everything you needed was already there, had been hired onto the project somewhere. They just needed to be coordinated and managed better, basically, is what we did. And that times 10 or more is the next challenge that they came along and said, well, that seemed to go pretty well, so why don't we try to do that for all of the agencies and all of the federal government.
What we saw during healthcare.gov, with folks like Mike and others, was how a fairly concentrated group of innovators, as long as they had a clear direction from the White House, could actually transform something pretty quickly.
Digital technology has clearly revolutionized so many aspects of our lives. It's important that the full power of that digital revolution hit government, and it hasn't yet. And the opportunity for someone like Mikey and for all the rest of us who have signed up to serve. The opportunity is to have not just impact at scale, but impact with meaning.
Interacting with the government shouldn't be a thing that you automatically dread. Things like filing your taxes. This is like on the list of things that people put in, that usually mention in the same sense as like going to the dentist and stuff like that, right? And it's probably never going to be exactly fun, but a lot of look at the experience people had trying to sign up for healthcare.gov at first. Things like that should be a process that you go through and immediately forget about because it wasn't any big deal. And all of your other interactions with the government could be that smooth. Like, we have a lot of bad UI experiences that could go away. If we are a smash success, then a few years from now, you won't even know that we exist. You won't even remember that we ever existed because government technology is basically fine.
Some of this stuff is being done with digital service, some hot shots. I knew they were around now. They're starting to look official now. They've got suits and everything.
This is literally only because you're here.
Welcome to the American Intelligence Media, the home of the Anonymous Patriots. I'm Douglas Gable, your host, also known as Thomas Paine, and I'm continuing our 6-part conversation with the most amazing man in the world, Michael McKibben, the owner of Leader Technology. Michael,
glad to be back.
These conversations are a revelation to me. This last one I wanted to do much more informally, and I wanted to say, what is it you want to say that you haven't said? And then we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate the time and energy you guys have put into doing this interview. It's been a long trek for our company and me in trying to decide what we were going to do about the things we learned over time, because initially we thought there was going to be an immediate reaction we would do in the courts. And then as we dug into the courts, we realized these judges are corrupt, so what's the point? We're just going to get blindsided. So at that point, we just sort of said, well, we don't know what the solution is going to be, but let's just gather the data. And so in the process of all the data gathering we've done over this last decade, a lot of the actors that we see in the press every day now are the same actors that we've encountered in our investigation. And so pretty much when I disengaged from the idea of going back to court right away, I really looked at my responsibility from a Christian stewardship perspective, that God had given me an understanding of the circumstances that we had engaged in, but I didn't know the answer. So what I'm going to do is just take each day as it comes, and we are going to see what God has in store. So what I conclude after this decade is that God has led us here, and I've stopped being angry a long time ago with all these thieves. I feel sorry for them. They can't take any of this with them either. So the fact that they're accruing all this massive wealth doesn't really change their lives, and it doesn't give them power over other people's lives. But I basically said, I don't know where this is going, but let's just keep going. And as the pieces started coming together, it really became clear that we were called to understand what's going on, and it really started to come into focus during the presidential election, when it became clear that this cast of characters were intent on taking over the government, and that Hillary Clinton was their candidate to do that. And it was at that point that we had like 16 or 17 Republican candidates for president, and so it was clear that we couldn't have a situation where, if these guys got the reins of power for another 4 years, it was probably going to be too late, because as we know, Barack Obama was giving up control of the internet to the UN, and that wasn't a mistake. That was a very clear plan. And with that, he gave up basically the kill switch on the internet. And by that, I mean it's as easy as taking your name off a list to stop your website from being accessed anywhere on the planet. And that had been managed by the US government through ICANN, and was now transferred to this international control. So basically, we were 10 times more accessible, that's not the right word, vulnerable to a tyrant coming in and taking over the internet from an international base, that our whole way of life could have changed literally overnight. And I don't think people know how close we were before Donald Trump's election to that being what was going to happen, and that how this tyrant could easily take you off the list and then your website's gone forever. And if they decide you can't go back on, then you're done with use of communication. So there were a lot of things that started occurring. So as this information came into focus, it came into focus at the same time as the election. And so I decided, after Donald Trump became the nominee, to endorse him. And I recognized at that point that he was the victim of some of these psychological operations that you referred to, that I'm somewhat familiar with, but makes total sense, that he was being attacked with certain triggers and signals, and that was having an effect on a certain amount of the population. So I recognize that we better support this man, because he may be one of our last big hopes for getting this fixed. And so thank God he was nominated, and then he was elected. But then I realized, because of what I know about the internet, that was the beginning of the battle, that these guys had most of their troops in place throughout the network, throughout the systems. And they had bribed a lot of people. They had blackmailed a lot of people. So the system that was intended to take over was still there. And I think we're in the midst of that right now. So it's my prayer that God will continue to protect our president and his loyal staff, and that he will help, with our help, get us through this.
Russian interference in this election, I think, should be of utmost concern to all Americans.
Really? Well, what about your connection to the Kremlin cache, Mr. Podesta? Joining us right now from Tallahassee is Peter Schweitzer. He's the author of Clinton Cache, president of the Government Accountability Institute. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve.
So tell us about John Podesta and his connection to a Kremlin-backed company.
Well, in 2011, John Podesta joins the board of this very small energy company called Julian Energy, based out of Massachusetts. About 2 months after he joins the board, a Russian entity called Rusnano puts 1 billion rubles, which is about $35 million, into John Podesta's company. Now, what is Rusnano? Rusnano is not a private company, Steve. It is a fund directly funded by the Kremlin. In fact, the Russian science minister called Rusnano Putin's child. So you have the Russian government investing in one of John Podesta's businesses in 2011, while he is an advisor to Hillary Clinton at the State Department.
While he's an advisor to Hillary Clinton. Okay, does anybody in the Trump circle rise to the level where there's this kind of money involved?
No, I haven't seen that yet. Nobody that is, has an advisory role in the White House has had this money exchanged, and certainly the money hasn't exchanged, as far as we know, while they have been advising the president.
Okay, so all that big money, when he was an advisor to Hillary Clinton, who was running for president, he was and also at the U.S. Department of State, but also wasn't he a special counselor to Barack Obama when he was president, and did not disclose the fact that he had, apparently, it looks like, in his portfolio, all this Russian money?
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is part of the problem, Steve. So then in 2013, he goes to the White House to be special counselor to Barack Obama, and that requires that you have financial disclosures every year. In his financial disclosure form in 2013, he not only fails to disclose these 75,000 shares of stock that he has in Juul Energy, which is funded in part by the Russian government, he also fails to disclose that he is on one of the 3 corporate boards that this entity has. It's got this very complex ownership structure. He discloses he's on the company in Massachusetts, that he's on the board of a company in the Netherlands, but he fails to disclose that he's also on the executive board of the holding company. That's a clear violation of the disclosure rules, and I think needs to be looked at.
Sure. What's interesting is there's such a double standard. Members of the Trump team may have talked to some Russians, and we don't know the complete nature of that yet because the investigation is still out. May have talked to it. It's a lot different than actually having money in the bank that's tied to the Kremlin.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the question is during transitions, you always have conversations that take place, and you want to hope that nobody has made promises, and there's no evidence that any promises have been made. What makes the Podesta case clear is there was a transfer of money, and there was a transfer of a lot of money that stood to make John Podesta a lot of money. That is unique, and that's extremely troubling, because as the time that transfer is taking place, he is advising Hillary Clinton at the State Department. We know that from the Podesta emails, that he's helping her make personnel decisions, speech decisions, policy decisions. He's meeting with her monthly. So it's a transfer of money from a foreign government at a time that he is advising America's chief diplomat, Hillary Clinton.
And what are the chances of the big 3 networks doing this story tonight, Peter?
Well, I think I've said for a long time, when it comes to Russia, we always want to make sure that this stuff is vetted.
Okay. Peter Schweitzer, thank you very much.
This project is not here's a lot of data, let's quickly mine it for quotes and push it out. This is a proper investigative project where the data is informative, but it isn't going to make the story, it's going to guide the story. It concerns the international surveillance industry. And the international surveillance industry is something that I was following in detail about 10 years ago, but looking at this data and some other things that have come my way, it is clear that it is now metastasized into something that is really quite extraordinary. There are now around 100 companies, perhaps 30 major companies, involved in the provision of bulk surveillance equipment to intercept all telephone calls coming out of a country, all of them, and record them permanently, do automatic gender identification, speaker identification, stress identification, age group identification based on vocal qualities, and that is marketed all over. So every tin pot dictator has one.
Today's
WikiLeaks dump gives us another glimpse inside the Hillary Clinton campaign and some internal conflicts there. Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry searched through today's installment.
Hillary Clinton's health seemed to be a concern for top aides when she was prepping for the first Democratic debate in the fall of 2015. How bad is her head? Campaign Chairman John Podesta wrote to Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri, who replied, "Don't know. Huma left here about an hour ago. I just pinged again to ask about prep. Haven't heard back." A second email exchange shortly after Clinton launched her campaign in the spring of 2015 shows Huma Abedin talking about Clinton's appearance at an event and writes, "She's going to stick to notes a little closer this AM. Still not perfect in her head." New emails also reveal more about Clinton's dealings with Morocco. She solicited a $12 million donation to the Clinton Foundation from the King of Morocco. And Abedin said she had to go to that country as a condition of the money coming in. But Clinton backed out of the May 2015 speech because her political advisors worried pay-to-play allegations could overshadow the beginning of her White House bid. Here's what Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, said Sunday.
This was a scheduling matter, and we didn't want her going overseas.
But it appears that as late March and even early April, it was a go. In a March 2015 email, Mook tells Podesta sounds like that is still on the calendar. And while he downplayed all of this on Sunday, Mook wrote a February 2015 email marked Foundation Vulnerability Points, which listed out 2 pages of problems that could hamper the campaign, including donations from foreign governments like Morocco, private jets, and pricey hotels.
These are stolen documents.
And then there's a new email dragging President Obama deeper into the controversy over Clinton's private email account and server.
Mr. President, when did you first learn that Hillary Clinton used an email system outside the U.S. government for official business while she was Secretary of State?
The same time everybody else learned it through news reports.
That comment triggered immediate alarm from Clinton's top advisors. Cheryl Mills writing, "We need to clean this up. He has emails from her. They do not say state.gov. White House spokesman Josh Earnest tonight is stressing the president never said he did not trade emails with Clinton. He just didn't know the details about her server.
Good afternoon, everybody. Now, on Clinton's health, we want to be careful and note that, of course, you can't read body language over email. So when Podesta asked how bad is her head, could have been a reference to a head cold, or maybe Clinton could not get her head around a briefing book. And when Abedin said still not perfect in her head, the context was an event where Clinton was responding to an attack from Jeb Bush's camp. Did she mean Clinton had not gotten her head around the talking points? We simply don't know. But what we do know is that Hillary Clinton fell down a couple of months ago, Britt, and health has been an issue in this campaign.
When you know that she'd had that concussion
a couple of years ago,
and it sort of does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this is in WikiLeaks, where the campaign, as you saw, Robbie Mook, he's just saying, look, these were stolen by the Russians.
Yeah,
we're not going to engage on the facts.
I know,
we're not denying
it. They're
it.
not disputing. That's
Absolutely.
the point. All right, Ed, thank you very much.
The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan, and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. So that is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful.
Emails President Obama accused of lying about his knowledge of Hillary Clinton's private email server. Kelly Wright here live with a look at the brand new emails sending the Clinton campaign and White House into damage control. Good morning.
Good morning to you. It just doesn't stop. Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta said Hillary Clinton's email scandal is a hot mess, and now the White House is trying to distance itself from that hot mess. Emails among Hillary Clinton's top advisors reveal their concern not only on damage control for Clinton's email scandal, but also concerned that President Obama may not have told the whole truth and nothing but the truth about his knowledge of Clinton's emails.
When did you first learn that Hillary Clinton used an email system outside the U.S. government for official business while she was Secretary of State?
The same time everybody else learned it through news reports.
And so Cheryl Mills, who was Clinton's chief of staff at the State Department at the time, knew President Obama had exchanged emails with Clinton on that server saying, we need to clean this up. He has emails from her. They do not say state.gov. And 2 days later, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest publicly clarified, saying the president was not aware that Clinton's emails came from her personal email server and that she was using that server for all of her business. And another question rising from emails were emails about Hillary Clinton's head due to concern about her health. We don't really know. We do know she had a concussion, and campaign chairman John Podesta asked Jennifer Palmieri in an email before Clinton's first Democratic debate in 2015, how bad is her head? Palmieri replied, don't know. And then Huma Abedin left here about an hour ago. I just pinged her to ask about prep. Haven't heard back. And then Huma Abedin writes before Clinton's appearance at a public event, writing this, she's going to stick to notes a little closer this AM, still not perfect in her head.
The attack happened here early Sunday morning. 27-year-old Seth Rich, seen here in his LinkedIn profile picture, murdered as he walked in a neighborhood he called home.
Seth Rich was shot twice in the back in what police said looked like a botched robbery. He was taken to hospital but died 2 hours later, just one of 139 murders in the DC area last year. Still, the death of somebody linked to Hillary Clinton's campaign was enough to set the internet alight with theories about what might have really happened. In August, Wikileaks offered a $20,000 reward, and then on Dutch television, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange suggested that Rich was his source for the Democrats' emails.
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes
I didn't think I'd say this, but I'm going to say it, and I hate to say it. But if I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, because there has never been so many lies, so much deception. There has never been anything like it. And we're going to have a special prosecutor. When I speak, I go out and speak. The people of this country are furious. In my opinion, the people that have been long-term workers at the FBI are furious. There has never been anything like this, where emails, and you get a subpoena, and after getting the subpoena, you delete 33,000 emails. And then you acid wash them, or bleach them, as you would say, a very expensive process. So we're going to get a special prosecutor, and we're going to look into it, because you know what? People have been... Their lives have been destroyed for doing 1/5 of what you've done, and it's a disgrace. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Secretary Clinton, I want to follow up on that. I'm going to let you talk about email.
Because everything he just said is absolutely false, but I'm not surprised. In the first debate,
and the audience needs to calm down here.
I told people that it would be impossible to be fact-checking Donald all the time. I'd never get to talk about anything I want to do and how we're going to really make lives better for people. So, once again, go to HillaryClinton.com. We have literally Trump. You can fact check him in real time. Last time at the first debate, we had millions of people fact checking. So I expect we'll have millions more fact checking because, you know, it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
A former director with Cambridge Analytica, a data firm that worked with the Trump campaign, met with Wikileaks founder Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy in London last year to discuss the results of the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Embassy visitor logs obtained by The Guardian reveal that Brittany Kaiser, a director at Cambridge Analytica until earlier this year, visited with Assange in mid-February 2017 to discuss the U.S. election. Kaiser, according to the newspaper, has also been accused of funneling money to the organization in the form of cryptocurrency, which is not illegal but allows the donations to go unreported due to Bitcoin's private nature. It was reported last year that Assange had turned down an offer from Cambridge Analytica to help index and go through tens of thousands of stolen emails from former Secretary of State and 2016 Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Hillary Diane Rodham Clinton. 6 takeaways from 2018 Super Tuesday. House Dem to run for New York Attorney General. Over 100K voters' names left off rolls in Los Angeles County. Moore's private email server. We received a message back from them that he didn't want to and wasn't able to, and that was the end of the story. Cambridge Analytica's then CEO Alexander Nix said of Assange at an event in Portugal last year. The February 2017 meeting between Assange and Kaiser is the only known face-to-face meeting of a Cambridge Analytica employee and the WikiLeaks founder. Cambridge Analytica announced in May that the firm would shut down due to the negative press it received after it was reported that the firm obtained the private information of millions of Facebook users without their knowledge or consent before the 2016 election. The firm has denied any wrongdoing and claims the data was not used in its 2016 work for the Trump campaign.
I do feel responsible for it, and it's something that I regret. He's an upper-class Etonian who expects people to follow him wherever he goes. Alexander Nix is with me, and he starts with this sort of like razzle-dazzle. We work for the Pentagon, we work for MMG, MI6, we are brilliant and Eton and whatnot, and I'm a posh British man and you should trust me with all your money. Rogan offered us was something that was way cheaper, way faster, and of a quality that nothing matched. They had apps on Facebook that were given special permission to harvest data, not from just the person who used the app or joined the app, but also it would then go into their entire friend network and pull out all of the friends' data as well. Things like status updates, likes, in some cases private messages. We would only need to touch a couple 100,000 people to expand into their entire social network, which would then scale us to, most of America.
And people had no idea that their data was being taken in this way?
We don't work with Facebook data, we don't have Facebook data. We do use Facebook as a platform to advertise, as do all brands and most agencies, or all agencies I should say.
From when I was there, that's just fundamentally not true, because we spent $1 million harvesting tens of millions of Facebook profiles. The company itself was founded on using Facebook data. We would know what kinds of messaging you would be susceptible to and where you're going to consume that. And then how many times do we need to touch you with that in order to change how you think about something? It is a full-service propaganda machine.
Let's talk about Cambridge Analytica for a second. The data. The data is just a cost. The data from Facebook is just about the cost of it. That data is out there. There's a marketplace for your data. It's bought and sold every day.
Yeah, but the people didn't know it was being leaked.
That's the difference. That's the issue between Cambridge, the professor, and Facebook. And by the way, there's an open.
Were you aware of that leak? You didn't.
I didn't even know about the Facebook mining. But hang on. The point is that is Facebook's business. In 2008. It was Google and Facebook that went to Barack Obama and met him in San Francisco airport and told him all about the power of this personal data. In 2012, and we have the woman who headed up data integrity said, hey, Facebook gave us the information because they were quote unquote on our side. So the great opposition party, media, never went after the Obama campaign, never went after the progressive leftists. They've been doing this for years. And in 2013, when I thought that a data company might be important, all of a sudden it becomes global news. Yeah. And by the way, the information out there, the information for the Facebook thing, it's just about the cost of it. Did the guy pay $1 or you got to pay $2 or $3 for it? It's just a cost thing. That data is all out there. And that's how Facebook, that's how they take your stuff for free. They sell it and monetize it for huge margins. That's why the companies trade for such high valuations. Then they write algorithms to control your life. And yet when Zuckerberg comes, he sounds like a first-year associate hired in corporate development, mumbles through the whole interview, and nobody asks him a tough following question.
Right. Let's just go back to that wonderfully named Cambridge Analytica.
Yep.
You will be...
You're like a dog with a bone on this, aren't you?
It's a tasty bone, though. There's a lot of juice.
There's still a lot of meat left in that bone.
Yeah. So let's just pick it apart here, because Mr. Nix, he didn't just boast about the data he had. He boasted about the dirty tricks.
That's all. Okay, that's another company. That's SCL. That's his company, run by Brits. Old Etonians.
With Robert Mercer's investment?
Absolutely not. There's not a penny of Robert Mercer's money. SEL, no way. SEL is a separate company. It's their company that does stuff throughout the world.
So you're saying
all staffed by British guys from Cambridge and Oxford.
Not all Etonians, though.
Not all old Etonians. But whatever they do in the world is not it. All Cambridge Analytica is the data scientist and the applied applications here in the United States. It has nothing to do with the international stuff. The Guardian actually tells you that, and the Observer tell you that when you get down to the 10th paragraph, okay? When you get down to the 10th paragraph, and what Nix does overseas is what Nix does overseas, right? It was a data company. And by the way, Cruz's campaign and the Trump campaign say, hey, they were a pretty good data company, but this whole thing on psychographics was optionality in the deal. If it ever worked, it worked. But it hasn't worked, and it doesn't look like it's going to work. So it was never even applied. Here's the point. The progressive left and the opposition party cannot get over one basic fact. Donald J. Trump is president of the United States, and he beat Hillary Clinton. He beat her badly. First, you had to run to Russia, okay? Now, Russia didn't work out. How do we know Russia didn't work out? Because the House report shows you there's nothing on collusion. And Mueller's investigation shows you he's looking at either Trump Organization financials, or he's looking at... Hang on. He's looking at obstruction of justice. My point is, you struck out on Russia.
Yeah.
And now you've got to go to Cambridge Analytica. That's what won it for you. Here's what won it for you. Here's what won it for Trump. Economic nationalism and talking in a plain voice to the American people.
Okay. I think I've heard that record before, but
that happens to be the facts.
just let's have a quick answer here. Do you believe that Donald Trump should shake up and sack his legal team?
I've said that from day one. I've been public.
So what's the significance of John Dowd's?
Well, he got fired. I mean, they brought in de Geneva to be much more aggressive. And I think I think it's pretty obvious that that Ty Cobb and John Dowd did a very okay, let's just step back. Why did I get lit up on Capitol Hill by the House Intel Committee? Because the White House, Don McGahn, exerted executive privilege over any questions about the transition or the White House. I answered every question on the campaign about Russian collusion. Okay? Schiff and these guys' heads are blowing up. Today, he's going to subpoena me again because of the transition in the White House, because Don McGahn exerted executive privilege. Ty Cobb and John Dowd had a radical theory. Let's totally cooperate and waive executive privilege. Okay? I have said, as I told the president and told everybody, and I told Brother Dowd, I think that's wrong. There is a process. There's a process that Reagan used, there's a process that Clinton used, there's a process that Bush used. And I think you ought to go through that process.
Right.
And that's why, by the way, John Dowd's a good man, and I think that's why essentially more aggressive attorneys got brought in that are now, I think...
Russian military intelligence, or the GRU, compromised the email accounts of Democratic Party officials and publicly released victim data using the Guccifer 2.0 persona.
Because apparently the devil no longer wears Prada and definitely doesn't work for Vogue. Guccifer is a hacker behind some of the biggest hacks in recent history, targeting politicians and celebrities alike. But in January, Guccifer was got. And after years of flying under the radar, local media finally snapped the first photos of Guccifer, who turned out to be 42-year-old Romanian cab driver Marcel Lazar Lehel. But he was such a nice man. Lehel confessed to the hacking and on June 7th was sentenced to 4 years in a Romanian prison. He began releasing his hacked gems in 2013 to the website The Smoking Gun, and in emails to the site called his victims the Illuminati that the world of tomorrow will be free of. So just who are the so-called Illuminati Guccifer took aim at? Drum roll, please. The Bushes, including former US President George W., who you might say owes his painting career to Guccifer's tricks. In January of last year, the hacker leaked images of W's bathroom self-portraits. Thankfully, all safe for work, just not for lunch. Guccifer also targeted Bill Clinton when he leaked the former American president's doodles on official White House docs, one of which features a drumstick and an excited man right next to the name of former Senator Bob Dole. Let's leave that one to the family therapist. Then there were the steamy emails from Colin Powell to the European Parliament member Corina Cretu, and the changing of John Negroponte's email password. The former American ambassador to Honduras in the early 80s, during a time when the Honduran military committed human rights abuses against its own people, received the new password HondBabyKill1. He also nabbed the email accounts of celebrities like Nicole Kidman and Leonardo DiCaprio, the phone numbers of Robert Redford and Warren Beatty, and released the first 50 pages of Candace Bushnell's latest book, Someone's Not a Sex and the City Fan. How did he do it? Guessing. That's right, Guccifer guessed the passwords to the accounts he hacked based on their personal info gleaned from the web. Then he used the hacking technique hopscotching, whereby a hacker accesses someone's email contacts to find their next victim. But author Diane McWhorter, whose Gmail password fell prey to the hacker, wrote in a New York Times op-ed piece that Google, not Guccifer, bears the blame.
Twitter messages obtained by The Atlantic appear to show longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone communicating with WikiLeaks during the 2016 presidential campaign. In a tweet last year, the group denied ever messaging with Stone on Twitter. Here's what Roger Stone had to say on CBS This Morning just 4 days after that tweet.
I wrote an extensive investigative piece on John Podesta, the organized crime in Russia, and money laundering for the Clinton Foundation, which is what my reference was to. It did not say hashtag WikiLeaks. So there's a supposition. When Podesta says you foreshadowed the fact that WikiLeaks would hack his email account, no, I didn't. I didn't say that at all. I simply said that he would come under scrutiny, and he did.
So were you surprised when John Podesta's emails came out, as you seemed to predict ahead of time?
I was interested, like the rest of the country.
Were you surprised?
No, I wouldn't say that I was surprised.
But the Atlantic's reporting appears to show otherwise. The article, Roger Stone's Secret Messages with WikiLeaks, takes a look at the messages between the group and the former Trump advisor. Natasha Bertrand covers national security and the intelligence community for The Atlantic, and she has more now on exactly what Stone and the group discussed. Hello, Natasha.
Hi.
So let's take it back to September of last year. Testimony with the White House Intelligence Committee. Stone insisted he only communicated with WikiLeaks through an intermediary. These messages kind of fly in the face of that and show otherwise. So describe exactly what was communicated between Roger Stone and the group during then candidate Trump's campaign.
So this was a screenshot of an exchange that I obtained that took place in October and November of 2016. Of course, Stone was under oath when he testified to the House Intelligence Committee that he communicated with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange through an intermediary, and this would seem to fly in the face of that. But essentially, he had reached out to WikiLeaks in October, and he said, "Hey, stop attacking me. Stop, distancing yourself from me, because I'm doing a lot of the defense of you guys that other people just won't. You don't have a lot of allies right now, essentially." And WikiLeaks responded and said, "Well, we want you to stop claiming falsely that you are associated with us, because that undermines the impact of our publications, and it's being used by the Democrats." Stone then responds, "Well, you really need to figure out who your friends are." Again, this implication that Stone is one of their only friends at that point. And then, of course, on the morning of November 9th, right after Donald Trump wins the election, WikiLeaks reaches out again and says, "Are you happy? We are now more free to communicate." So when I asked Stone about these text messages, he implied that this was not the extent of them. He implied that they had actually communicated more, and that the exchange that I had obtained was taken out of context. So it really kind of remains to be seen. And then, of course, when I asked him for the entire context of the messages, he would not provide them to me. So that is still up in the air.
Did you ask him why he said that he only spoke through an intermediary when clearly he didn't?
He insists now he's kind of narrowing the scope of his denial. So he's insisting that he never said explicitly that he did not speak to WikiLeaks directly. He said that he did not speak to Julian Assange directly. So he's trying to parse words a bit and have a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to whether or not he actually perjured himself before Congress.
So speaking of wiggle room, he also came out and said that he had talked to Guccifer 2.0, right? And then when he was sort of called to task about it, if I recall, he started to waffle a little bit. But how does his conversation with Guccifer, this hacker, factor into the timeline here?
Right, so his conversation with Guccifer took place a little bit earlier, before he started showing signs that he knew about what WikiLeaks was going to drop. So he started talking to Guccifer because Guccifer, of course, was the one claiming to have hacked the Democratic National Committee, essentially taking the heat off of the Russians. And Stone was convinced, either for whatever reason, that Guccifer was telling the truth, even though U.S. intelligence officials have since concluded that he was actually a front for Russian military intelligence. So this all kind of goes into the big pot that I think federal and congressional investigators are very interested in looking at, is did Stone serve as kind of a liaison between the campaign in communicating with entities that were dumping documents that damaged and undermined his political rival?
Were there any indications, Natasha, that he purported to be a member of the Trump administration with his presidential campaign? Clearly, he had very strong ties to the campaign, but was there any indication that I'm working on behalf of, hence, this is the information we have, and this is the relationship, wink, wink, that we can work together?
No. So in the exchange that I saw, Stone did not represent himself as a member or an associate of the Trump campaign. But of course, it was understood at that point that Roger Stone was a longtime advisor and confidant of Donald Trump's, and that he actually left the campaign in August of 2015, but he stayed in touch with Trump himself through 2016, and he actually was among the members that recommended that Paul Manafort join the campaign as campaign chairman.
Any evidence that anyone in the Trump presidential campaign were aware of these communiques before or after?
So that's another question that I have not gotten an answer to. My sources tell me that Stone did provide this communication with WikiLeaks and others to a friend, kind of bragging about the fact that he was talking to WikiLeaks. Whether or not that friend was actually within the campaign orbit is something that we're still looking into.
So the Democrats have been asking the Republicans to subpoena this Twitter dialogue, these private messages. at this point, why is it important? Why do the Democrats want their hands on this stuff?
Well, it's because we've seen so many instances of, these kind of covert communications happening between members of Trump's campaign or his associates and WikiLeaks now. I mean, we had Donald Trump Jr. Communicating with WikiLeaks throughout the end of the election, and now we have Roger Stone. And there are other associates who apparently are of interest to the committee whose names we don't know yet. Perhaps the committee has gotten some kind of testimony to the effect of, well, this person was actually communicating via Twitter direct message with a Russian entity or with a Russian cutout. And that, of course, is why the Democrats really want to get to the bottom of it, not least because of what we've already seen with Stone and Donald Trump Jr., but the Republicans are hesitant to do that.
Yeah. WikiLeaks is sort of sells itself as an organization interested in radical, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Radical
transparency.
Transparency.
That's what they call themselves.
Right. That's what. Yeah. Who is WikiLeaks now, though? I mean, after the 2016 elections, watching them sort of be embroiled in this, Julian Assange, I mean, how should we think of this organization?
It's a really interesting question, and it's one that many people have been trying to answer ever since they essentially became cutouts for the Russians during the election. Now, of course, the director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, he characterized WikiLeaks last year as a hostile intelligence service, as kind of an agent of a foreign power that's willing to take help from dictatorships and autocrats in order to undermine the West, because the U.S. has become enemy number one for WikiLeaks, and there are a number of internal chats that reflect that. I think that WikiLeaks, of course, started out as a transparency organization, was kind of a hero for the left, and now it's kind of ever since Julian Assange kind of got locked up in the embassy 5 years ago, their mission has kind of shifted, and I think his hatred of Hillary Clinton and his hatred of the U.S. has started to consume the organization's mission.
I want to get your opinion on all of the news that's breaking right now. On Monday, Google said suspected Russian agents paid for tens of thousands of dollars worth of political advertisements last year aimed at swaying the 2016 presidential election. Managers at Microsoft said Monday they too were investigating whether Russian operatives paid for inappropriate pro-Trump ads on its Bing search engine and other platforms. Social media giant Facebook has said a Russian company placed thousands of ads on their network at a cost of more than $100,000. CNN reports a number of ads specifically targeted Michigan and Wisconsin, two states crucial to Trump's victory in November. And Twitter reported last month it discovered about 200 accounts linked to a Russian campaign to influence the election. This comes as the head of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee said last week it's reached the conclusion that Russia did interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Republican Senator Richard Burr said his committee is still examining evidence to determine if there's any collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign. Your response to all of this, WikiLeaks editor-in-chief Julian Assange.
Well, I think there's a very good article recently published in The Nation which goes through all of that, and it's shown to be nearly all fiction. The parts that you can actually determine, where you can compare with internally contradictory statements or other things, shows that it's nearly all fiction. Whether there's any truth to it, I don't know. We haven't researched that. I would say that I think it's very concerning to see this neo-McCarthyist hysteria, very, very dangerous in geopolitical terms, and of course its attempt to unite the Democratic Party, CIA structures together and the media in their assault against the Trump regime. But I think there's plenty of important things to criticize the Trump administration about. For example, their promises to help the working class, but in fact trying to push forward enormous tax cuts for the rich. And that these are the things that should be concentrated on, not leaping into an insane bout of anti-Russian hysteria.
Julian Assange, I wanted to ask you about Roger Stone. In March of 2016, he posted on Facebook that he, quote, never denied that Assange and I had a mutual friend who told me WikiLeaks had the goods on HRC, that's Hillary Rodham Clinton, and would begin disclosures in October. He did, and they did. I didn't admit it. I announced it, unquote. In a series of tweets, which he later deleted, Roger Stone also attacked a woman who challenged him on Twitter, writing, quote, you stupid, B word, never denied perfectly legal back channel to Assange, who indeed had the goods on crooked Hillary. I now wanted to talk about the latest, Roger Stone going to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee and what came out of that, your response to that.
Roger Stone has been trolling Democrats all his life, and he's doing exactly the same thing in order to elevate his profile. That's all. You can look at our statements at the time. He didn't say anything that I hadn't been saying in public at the time.
So let me turn to Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff speaking at a hearing.
I just say that the effectiveness of that trolling just shows you how mad the U.S. political culture has become. Is Roger Stone presented as a credible character in his statements? Is that a credible person? Do Democrats think that he's credible?
Well, I think the issue is his closeness to Trump and whether or not you think Trump or Roger Stone is credible.
Look. He's. If he had something to worry about, why would he be deliberately playing it up constantly? He doesn't have anything to worry about. That's why he's playing it up.
What do you mean?
he doesn't have anything to worry about because there is no back channel. There was never a back channel. We've said at the time, he's produced no evidence of it. We've complained about it. He's simply trolling the absolute, they want to be trolled. They don't care. They don't care what the truth is at all. So, all they want is some little propaganda point that they can use to somehow satisfy their ridiculous fantasies about taking down Trump in relation to Russia. And if Roger Stone is going to help with that, they will give him a massive platform. And that's exactly what they've done. He's sold a lot more books as a result. I mean, you have to admire the chutzpah and I suppose the cleverness at which he's done it. It's in some sense admirable. What is not admirable, even though it's really irritated us, is the slavish reaction of those. He just throws a ball like that, and these mindless mobs of people aligned to the Democrats and the democratically aligned media in the United States run after it and eventually over the cliff.
Well, let me turn to Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff speaking at a hearing of the House Intelligence Committee earlier this year.
On August 8th, Roger Stone, a longtime Trump political advisor and self-proclaimed political dirty trickster, boasts in a speech that he has communicated with Assange and that more documents would be coming, including an October surprise. In August, he also communicates with a Russian cutout Guccifer 2 and authors a Breitbart piece denying Guccifer's links to Russian intelligence. Then later in August, Stone does something truly remarkable when he predicts that John Podesta's personal emails will soon be published. Trust me, he says, it will soon be Podesta's time in the barrel, #CrookedHillary. In the weeks that follow, Stone shows a remarkable prescience. I have total confidence that WikiLeaks and my hero, Julian Assange, will educate the American people soon, he says, #LockHerUp. Payload coming, he predicts, and 2 days later, it does. WikiLeaks releases its first batch of Podesta emails. The release of John Podesta's emails would then continue on a daily basis up until the election.
Your response, Julian Assange, to Adam Schiff of the House Intelligence Committee, ranking Democrat.
Well, Schiff is not a credible person. He's just lying in order to score political points. I had been saying all these things publicly, that we were going to publish information on Hillary Clinton before the election. Yeah.
So this is,
and the media got it into its stupid head, in fact, that we were going to publish it on October 4th, and that spread around everywhere. And so Roger Stone's comments are responding to that kind of thing. But I don't want to feed into. I understand that there's a weird psychological phenomenon happening in the United States presently, but I don't want to feed into it because I think it's essentially inconsequential in historical circumstances unless it leads to a war with Russia. I don't know what the Trump's campaign's connections are with Russia. I can only speak about us. Had no connections with us. We have no connections with Russia. So I think if the Russians have done anything else, as far as I can see, it's not of a consequential nature.
But Julian, this is the
this will come out. But as far as I can determine, not that I'm spending a lot of time on it. As far as I can determine, there's nothing of any scale or significance.
But this is the anniversary of the email being released, the John Podesta emails. And I think it's important because what's happening in these congressional investigations, Roger Stone is a key figure, whether you think he's credible or not, to have you respond, to make your point. I wanted to play Roger Stone. Let me just play and you respond to Roger Stone. Let me just play 2 quick clips. August 8th, this is him speaking in Florida.
With regard to the October surprise, what would be your forecast on that, given what Julian Assange has intimated he's going to do?
Well, it could be any number of things. I actually have communicated with Assange. I believe the next tranche of his documents pertain to the Clinton Foundation, but there's no telling what the October surprise may be.
Was he lying, Julian?
Well, as you said, he just said that they would pertain to the Clinton Foundation, which he was wrong. He's just repeating what I said in the press.
So then more recently, let's turn to Roger Stone speaking to reporters following his appearance in this closed hearing of the House Intelligence Committee. His interview with lawmakers was part of the investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election.
I made the case that the accusation that I knew about John Podesta's email hack in advance was false, that I knew about the content and source of the WikiLeaks disclosures regarding Hillary Clinton was false, and that my exchange with someone claiming to be Guccifer 2.0, when viewed through the context, content, and timing, was benign and innocuous.
Stone also told reporters he declined to name his WikiLeaks intermediary during the interview.
The reason I am not submitting that name is because the intermediary is a journalist, and our conversation was off the record. I'm an opinion journalist. He's a journalist. I'm not going to burn somebody who I spoke to. If he releases me, if he allows me to release it, I would be happy to give it to the committee. I'm actually going to try to do that.
Now, that, of course, Roger Stone isn't a journalist, but what is your response to what he's saying right here, that there was an intermediary between you and him who is a journalist?
The United States political culture has gone mad. Roger Stone is trolling epically the Democratic political class in order to elevate his profile. And it's sad to see that Democracy Now! Is buying into it.
Presenting the News is not buying into it. Presenting the News is having you respond to what he's saying because you are the center of this in this particular case, and it's important to hear your voice.
Look, Amy, I'm getting annoyed. There is a historic event occurring this afternoon involving Catalonia that could well change the nature of Europe, what forms of repression are acceptable within the Western world, and what moves populations can take in order to resist repression and come together to secure their self-determination. This has been the greatest Gandhian project that has occurred. Millions of Catalonians turning out to vote in the street, being beaten aggressively by Spanish security forces, being hacked by Spanish security forces, having their telephone exchange occupied, having their political leadership arrested, being threatened, as we saw today, with rebellion and put in prison for a minimum of 25 years. That is going to spread throughout the Western world. The lessons of this are going to spread throughout the Western world to secessionist movements, but also to the states trying to repress them and to repress people's struggles for self-determination in general. The discipline with which the Catalan population have carried out their referendum is astounding. Astounding that millions of people going to the polls, being beaten by the police, and not one image of them fighting back. Not one image. That's incredible discipline. It's similarly in their marches and so on. And if the US left is not absolutely obsessed with what is happening there and the redefinition that is occurring of the nature of the relationship between population and state, well, I mean, I have no time for you.
Well, we certainly had time for you today, Julian, and I think you made some really critical points.
So what should Americans demand of Congress in light of the Twitter file revelations? Unfortunately, if a tool of centralized speech control can be abused by a government, it's a virtual certainty that it will be abused eventually. We should follow the advice of Julian Assange and the cypherpunk movement that shaped his thinking, which maintained that technology, not government policy, is the only effective check on authoritarian tendencies in the long run.
You cannot trust a government to implement the policies that it says that it's implementing. And so we must provide the underlying tools, cryptographic tools that we control as a sort of use of force.
The good news is that many people are gradually waking up to the dangers of allowing a company to maintain centralized control over the public conversation.
Tell us about the efforts the State Department has made to get Evan free. And in particular, I'm curious whether you've been able to talk.
Excuse us, we can't use this day without calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. The Biden... The extradition request for Julian Assange.
2 hours and not one word.
Take it easy, take it easy, take it easy, guys.
Not one word about journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was murdered.
We're here to celebrate freedom of expression, and we just experienced it.
2.5 years in prison after being wrongfully convicted on no evidence of violating the Espionage Act. It was a travesty of a trial. And that sentence was held up as a shining example of the reasonableness and fairness that Julian Assange will face being tried here for violating that same Espionage Act. It is virtually impossible to defend against the Espionage Act. Truth is no defense. In fact, any defense related to truth will be prohibited. In addition, he won't have access to any of the so-called evidence used against him. And to make it even more difficult, the government doesn't have to show any harm. It is a law and prosecution in which the government says what it wants. It's a because we say so law, not to be questioned, not to be challenged.
As we turn now to look at the case of Julian Assange as calls grow for him to be freed. The Wikileaks founder has been locked up for 4 years in London's Belmarsh prison, where he awaits possible extradition to the U.S. to face espionage and hacking charges for publishing leaked documents about U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. He faces up to 175 years in prison in the United States if convicted. This comes as a growing number of politicians in Australia are calling on the United States to drop its case against Julian Assange, who is an Australian citizen. In April, 48 Australian lawmakers signed a letter to the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland saying the U.S. prosecution of a journalist and publisher has, quote, set a dangerous precedent for press freedom. A group of Australian lawmakers also met recently with U.S. Ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy. Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has also spoken out. In May, he talked about Assange during an interview with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC.
Enough is enough. This needs to be brought to a conclusion. It needs to be worked through, including we're working through diplomatic channels, but we're making very clear what our position is on Mr. Assange's case. When Australians look at the circumstances, look at the fact that the person who released the information is walking freely now, having served some time in incarceration, but is now released for a long period of time, then they'll see that there's a disconnect there. There is nothing to be served by his ongoing incarceration.
That's the Australian Prime Minister.
Julian Assange y Wikileaks están siendo tratados como una amenaza por algunos países occidentales. No estamos ante una amenaza, sino ante un periodista y un medio de comunicación que ejercen el derecho fundamental a recibir y difundir información en estado puro. No podemos sino acudir a los diferentes ámbitos en los que podemos actuar. Uno de ellos es este, el de Naciones Unidas. Julian Assange, ahora tendremos oportunidad de oírlo, siempre ha estado a disposición de la justicia, siempre ha estado en defensa de derechos fundamentales y por eso precisamente, y no por otra razón, se encuentra en la situación en la que actualmente está. Por ser periodista, por ser informador, por ser editor de un medio de comunicación como Wikileaks y haber puesto en conocimiento de todo el mundo los abusos de poder, los casos de corrupción y el aprovechamiento ilícito de unas estructuras que, debiendo estar para proteger a los ciudadanos, los agredieron.
Julian Assange has told the truth about what the US was up to in Afghanistan, in Iraq, about Guantanamo Bay, and about their war planning, their gaming, and all the rest of it, and exposed the truth about so much. Julian Assange actually speaks for all of us. He is our voice of humanity. So do everything you can to support Julian Assange. The media around the world seem a bit nervous about getting too involved in the campaign about Julian Assange. I say this to all of our friends in the media. He has told the truth about things. That is what investigative, real journalism is about. It's designed and should be to make life uncomfortable for people in office and people in power. I know that. That's right. That's what democracy is about, challenging people. Julian challenged, so they put him in prison. Release Julian Assange!
Yeah. Free Julian Assange, he deserved to be free. Nobody deserved chains for the truth he told me and many others. When we gon' stand for our